meeting of the Board of Education order. If we could rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Rabin, second. Ms. Dayton.
I'd like to amend the agenda.
Okay, Ms. O'Neill.
I'd like to amend the agenda to add agenda planning at the end of the meeting.
I have a second.
Can you explain what the purpose of that would be?
Yes, I want to discuss an agenda item on the next meeting.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, so this would be to add agenda planning as item 2D. There's no discussion. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, all those abstaining. 401 passes. Actually, you know what? I'm not sure. What's that? Dr. Francis, for voting purposes.
I think the regular vote, well, 5 people are voting, even though you're abstaining, does that count as a vote? And thus, that's 5.
Give us 1 minute. This is interesting. We have a bylaw for quorum. The majority of the entire board membership shall constitute a quorum. The board may take no actions action in the absence of a quorum. It doesn't actually talk about voting, so I think we might have to look elsewhere. Well, give us a minute.
Peter Sher is arriving if you want to.
We've already-
Motion to reconsider.
We've already
We
voted.
can have a motion to reconsider.
Yeah, he needs the discussions.
What is the non-member? Okay. What did you want to add, Jennifer?
Just agenda planning, but the question is, if there's 5 members present and only 4 of them voted in the affirmative, does that count as a majority vote?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what our policies actually say about voting.
I don't know if it says anything
That's a quorum. It's a majority of the quorum.
So I'll tell you what, I'll amend my vote so that it'll be 5-0. I'd like to change my vote, so it's 5-0, so we will add agenda planning at the end and we can take it up then.
Thank you.
All right, so all those in favor of the, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dayton, you did a motion to change the agenda. Ms. Dayton.
I'd like to amend the agenda to move the program inventory update to the top of the meeting agenda.
So the first discussion item, I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor? We're just moving the program inventory up to the first, so are you a yes, no, or abstain? I guess, is that a yes, no, or abstain, Peter?
It's, yeah,
Okay.
doesn't matter.
It does because Lori has a kids concert, so.
Okay, fine, sure, great.
Okay, so that passes 5. That passes 5-0 because we're all parents. So, yeah, all right, very good. So,
Yes, that's 6.
that's 6, so 6-0, thank you. So the motion on the table is to approve the meeting agenda as amended. All those in favor? 6-0, thank you very much. All right, so the first item is the program inventory, the moment you've been waiting for.
Right, well, Michael just said up there on the screen, this is the project we've been working on since December. This is the project that I gave to Kim, Lori, and Jen Lau to start working on. And as it says in the slide, and I know you don't want to read from slides, this is the balcony view of the GPS programs. Okay? All right. So the introduction's fairly simple. We're going to provide you with a progress update of the program inventory project. the management information for the superintendent. This information is going to serve as a starting point for managing programs and evaluating a program's value vis-a-vis its resource allocation, audience served, purpose, and outcomes. Over the last several months, we have curated many data sources. None of the data is new. Just want to make sure you understand, none of this is new. But it required the authentication and verification process for the purpose of consistency. Still in draft form, and we're still testing assumptions about this data that we put together. We're trying to compare as close as possible, apples to apples, with programs that exist for different purposes and serving different audiences. It's very important that remember that, apples to apples, but still programs that are serving different audiences. These documents are not in and of themselves a decision-making tool. It is a management tool and a screening process used to guide us in prioritizing programs for further review and for monitoring progress toward goal attainment, among other management monitoring process. There is a lot to absorb. So I'll ask you to hold your questions to the end, and then we will go back to any slide you'd like to discuss. Also, we'll post these slides once the meeting's over tonight. So you'll have these slides so you can go back and look at them. And we didn't give these to you in advance because we thought there was a lot of explaining to do. So we wanted to hold them, show them to you tonight, and then you'll get the slides, and then you can dig into them. And we welcome your questions. Take a sip. All right, let's see here. Okay, so again, management tool 2, articulate the impact of a given program. I'm not going to read this from the slides. I did that at leadership already, and they were bored out of their mind, so I'm not going to read it to you again. I'm just letting you know that, again, what's the impact in relation to its resource allocation? That's a key question that we're looking here. Audience served, purpose, and outcomes. Provide information necessary to set priorities and gain a deeper understanding of the impact of our investments, both human and financial. Okay, and this will help us, again, to inform budget development and operational plans. So the current scope, we took in other words, the program definition, we took 50 programs that are in Munis. And we did that because it minimizes any accounting redundancies, it minimizes any staffing redundancies. So these 50 programs are in Munis. So that's what we define as a program. There's possibly future scope in terms of programs within programs, like in-lab, instructional coaches, the magnet schools program. But these are remember again, these are budget coded programs. So we're trying to use a common language here. All right, so as I started the presentation off, we started back in December when I asked Kim, Lori, and Jen to start this project. We showed you guys what it was going to look like, gave you a draft of our project plan back in January. We took a snapshot of each program. We completed a dashboard of all 50 programs. They're all on the dashboard. We are testing assumptions. I'm sorry, the snapshots of each program are not completed yet, but are on track to be completed. And we did some screening. Phase 2 of this project is to identify programs where we're going to need a deeper dive. Okay? Phase 3, which would take place next year, deeper analysis of select programs, clarify programs' purposes and goals as needed, and establish key aligned impact outcomes metrics. And then, if need be, we would do a facilitator review of select programs. So 2 types of reviews, one that we can do internally, and the second one where we have to go outside and have someone come in and take a look at our programs for us. So that's what we're looking at right now. And this is this is a program snapshot, and we put up the math program actually, but it lists, who's responsible, purpose, relevant metrics, goals and targets, strategies and key activities, target audience, impact unit, which we'll explain in a second, staffing, expenditures, and outcomes. So each snapshot of each of the 50 programs will contain all this information. We just don't have all the snapshots completed yet. All right, and this is what the dashboard looks like. Again, we've taken key data points from the snapshots and compiled a single summarized spreadsheet for comparative purposes. It provides us with a balcony view of the program, their cost, staffing, students or staff served, and ratios of students to staff, and cost per unique student, and cost per impact unit. Unit of impact basically means the basis of comparison of the activities of a program. So for example, we use enrolled credits to create a consistent basis of comparison between a math course that is taught every day versus a 22-day health class. So a math teacher who teaches the same 120 students enrolled for a year-long course has the same number of credits as a health teacher who teaches over 900 students, but only for an eighth of the time. So it's a good way to do that in terms of comparing apples to apples. For the district coaches, the unit of impact is teacher collaboration. For administrators, it's especially building administrators, it's for their schools, and then the unit is different from our outcome metric. The outcome metric captures the results of the program. Mastery math concepts would be an example of outcome metric. And the next slide. We took the data from the dashboard, developed a process for prioritizing and screening. So this is where we're going to take a look at in order to decide which programs need a deeper dive. All right? And we're still trying to determine how we're going to screen the programs that we've identified. So this is just one way. There's 2 other ways that we looked at to screen our program. So don't get attached to this one too much, because we might switch to a different way to screen. But the purpose, no matter which way we do it, is to prioritize programs that would consider for a further review. So this is where we're going to go to determine if we do an internal review or if we need a facilitated review. We can use this type of metric. But again, this is only the first layer of screening. This method reflects the total program budget on the y-axis and the cost per impact unit on the x-axis. We find this screen to be helpful because it provides a view of the relative cost of providing instruction or service. Once we identify the programs that we want to explore further, in this case, relative cost per student impact unit, we would then ask ourselves a series of other questions before a given program would be scheduled for a mini or facilitated review, such as, is the program mandated or elective? Does the program directly support our strategic objectives? To what extent has the program achieved expected outcome targets? Is the program achieving the stated objective purpose? For example, we take ESL, which is in box 6 up there. Relative high cost and per impact unit. So at first blush, using the screening method, you might target it for further review. However, we also know that it is a mandated program by statute and policy. One could argue it supports our strategic objectives in that it supports academic, interpersonal, and personal growth. And we know based on the latest monitoring report that the program is having a positive impact on student outcomes. So we might say that this program is effective and not need of an in-depth review at this time, or we may say, while quite effective and required, are there efficiencies that we can find? This is illustrative of the point that none of these data documents, the snapshot, the dashboard, the screening table, and in and of themselves present any absolute decisions at this point. This exercise that we've taken on, this research that we've done, does a number of things. It does at least 3 things for us anyway. For orientation purpose for the incoming superintendent, this is going to give Tony a great view of all our programs, what they cost, and so on and so forth, their goals, their staffing, etc., which I've said a couple times already. It's a nice tool for accountability, planning discussions with program leaders, and it again identifies a need for deeper program analysis or a facilitated review. All right, so is the program mandated or elective? Does the program directly support our strategic objectives? What is the impact of the program on expected outcomes? Is the program achieving its stated objective or purpose? We look forward to your constructive feedback and are happy to answer your questions.
Okay. All right, discussion, who's statement?
I'd like to know what student achievement data will be used to determine impact on outcomes.
So our SBA results, our next generation science standard testing will be used. We're also, that's achievement of this. I believe we're still going to use STAR. I'm not sure about that, Jen.
Yeah, each program has its own unique set of achievement data, so whatever is directly relevant to the program. So for science and GSS.
Right, so yeah, science, NGSS, math, SBA, language arts, SBA, and so forth and so on.
So
I'm sorry, someone else can speak to that.
I'll just give my thoughts. So thank you for picking this up. It seemingly went to sleep for a couple of months, so I know you're sort of playing catch up with this and trying to move it along, I guess.
Can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have to commend this group because I'm supposed to be sitting with them every time they meet, and they meet twice a week for 2 hours at a time. And then, once they've made their plan, they go off and do their work. So they've been working really hard on this since the first week in January, and this is the results of their labor. It's been a very difficult task, and I can get into that more later, but just want to give the commendation to Kim Lordy and Jen Lau.
That's the team. That's the 3. That's who's working on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, I guess I'll continue my train of thought if I can remember.
Sorry.
It's okay. I get the idea of starting with the high level with the Munis number, but within each of those high level programs, you know, especially the core chunk academic areas, my concern is, I'm flying here, my concern is that it's just not going to be deep enough in some of the spots. It's great to take that high level look, but I think we're going to need to drill down to see what else is baked into that budget. You're looking at the overall top number, you know, but there's a lot of spending that goes on beneath the surface beyond just the bodies. And so the question is, how are you going to figure out how to get to those without a deep dive in every small little area?
Right. I think just looking at those 50 programs, and I know, yeah, you're right, there's other spending that's going on within those 50 programs that we talked about that. There's programs within programs, but I think the first shot that we're taking here is doing a snapshot of each program, and then looking at going back to the dashboard and looking at programs that are that stick out to us in some way, you know. That's our first object. We can go deeper once we've done that, but we want to look at the programs that really are not, that are really, you know, sticking out to us because it's so much cost for a few students, or those programs may not be meeting the objectives that they're established for. So we're looking at that first, then we'll go into the programs within the program. I think that's what you're asking.
Ms. Stone?
Thanks, Ralph, because I know this did at one point start like a year and a half ago, and then it kind of did go to sleep, like you said, so thank you for picking it back up. First question, I'm sorry if you said at the beginning, is who sort of came up with this methodology? I.e., are we following like what another school district did, or is this something that we've all developed on our own?
This is something that we pretty much developed on our own.
Oh, because are there any comps out there? Do we know of any comps out there?
I mean,
Yeah, you should answer. Somebody from the team answer.
So yes, there were comps out there. There was a system that Jill Gilday, because I think she brought this concept to the board in the first place, that she used. So we looked at hers, and there was one other, I don't remember which district it was from, that we looked at. Those are the only ones that I was able to find. But, and you know, it's similar. I think ours is far more robust than the ones we looked at.
Peter?
This is maybe a question for you, Lori. Can you, the 50 you've picked, they cover 100% of the budget, right?
Yes.
Right, so if you pick all 50, you've covered everything, right? Okay, so that part. And then the 50 are the program codes that already exist. So if I go look in the budget book from this past year, I find all those program codes. That's what's the list is. You're not proposing to reorganize. This thing's snapshot.
Not
all?
during this phase, correct.
Right, so the programs are the programs as they're already constructed. Yes, okay. My second question is, Ralph, you talked about screens, and you showed one. You said, well, we've got 2 or 3 other screen methodologies, but you only showed one. You said one was budget, you know, cost categories, total expenditure categories, and then you called it, you know, cost per impact. What were the other 2 methodologies you're thinking about that is not that screen?
They were all cost per impact, all 3 of them, but we had put them in different boxes on the different programs into different boxes.
So the X and Y are the
For
same?
different reasons, yeah, the X and Y is exactly the same.
Ms. Rapin? Yeah, it's on.
You just use the, grab his info, Jeff.
I would prefer, yeah, if you can just hit the button, it will work.
I wasn't sure which button. I appreciate the robustness, but I would caution how robust to make it, because when I saw that snapshot was 2 pages, multiply that times 50 programs, that's 100 pages. We have this concept at work where we call things on a page, like strategy on a page or something on a page. I wonder if there's some data points that are more nice to have than need to have, and try to condense it, the snapshots, because I'm just thinking of the totality.
Ms. Tatey?
Since we know 82% of our students meet or exceed their expected growth, I really want to drill down on how you're evaluating student achievement performance on the SBA and the NGSS. Are we trying to get students to exceed what we already know is their projected growth? Is that how you're determining the impact of our programs? Or are we saying, if you meet that expected growth, that is an acceptable outcome?
We're always looking for our students to make, exceed their growth. Right? So growth is the metric that we always use, that we are currently using in the Greenwich Public Schools, and we should continue to use. This isn't about that. This is about going back and looking at what they have done and moving forward on what they've done and what the outcomes have been.
Yeah,
Mr. Sh-
I understood, I mean, if I'm following your plan properly, I'm gonna use different language. You guys by September are just finishing the catalog phase. Right, because what you're doing right now is you're creating these on a standard template, a catalog of standard information about everything that's a munis, at the highest level of munis, a program level code, right? And that's your first step. And I think what I'm hearing here is that you're in the middle of doing that. So you said, okay, we're gonna have a template. We're gonna go collect all the information in a standard way against that template for all 50 programs, right? We're gonna fill in all those boxes. And then we're gonna, to Lauren's point, we're gonna publish 100-page, because it's 2 pages per, right? The snapshots look like they're 2 pages, maybe they're longer, I don't know. But, so if I follow them, by the end of, through September, so that's by September 31, you're gonna have completed the catalog of the programs and collected the baseline information.
Yes.
And that's all you're gonna be doing by that stage, right?
Right. And then we'll start our review.
You'll identify the ones you further.
Okay, see, the thing that jumped out at me with the slide, and I leaned over to Kim and I said, you know, what jumped out at me was, which is really interesting, or at least from my perspective, is your objectives are all internal. You don't talk about the board. Go back the slide. Right, orientation of the superintendent, planning discussions with program leads, identify for new deeper analysis, is all inside. What's missing off of that is board engagement. And the other thing that's missing is it's actually an opportunity to, now that you have the data, to use it for communications to others. So I think my feedback to the program is I realize how you can get all inside, right? From my perspective on the board, I thought I mean, it's great to do this internally. I would have expected that this is what this is what all the people who are responsible for programs are supposed to be doing every day of their job. This is what they should be doing anyway, right? They should know what their program is, or the programs they're managing. They should know what their purposes are. They should know what their metrics are. They should know what their expenditures are. They should know where they are in their outcomes. It's just an exercise of getting that all down on paper, by the way. I don't mean to diminish. If you don't have it, and then you gotta go get 30 people in the organization to write down every day what they do, I get that that's a task. The step that I think has to happen is there has to be some level of engagement, at least I would think from a board perspective, because those people have to govern the system. We have to provide guidance, right? The framework is nice to facilitate the conversation of which programs to look at, but I'm not sure I would pick them. As a matter of fact, I most certainly would not pick them only on that XY axis. Right? It's a great place to start. It's great to give, like, here's a framework of how to think about it. But, so I love that you're making progress, but I'm curious, I think there's gotta be a step here that's like, in one of these retreats, and it's gotta be like, if you're gonna be done September 30th, I would like it to be October 1, right?
Peter,
But
to answer your question, we want the board.
Of course you do.
This
Of course you do. I know
is,
that.
and that's why we wanted to present it
Right.
in this format tonight,
Right,
so that,
you get the feedback.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
that's important.
those mini reviews and the facilitator reviews, well, the facility reviews, it's gonna cost money, so you guys are gonna have to be involved in that regardless. Okay, because that's gonna go into the budget. But we're gonna involve you in this discussion way before that happens.
I think you won't be able to engage us until you've completed your inventory and we can absorb the inventory, because each person here is going to be having different points of view on that, and that has to be a facilitated conversation, and I would hope it would come. If you're not going to be done until September 30th, okay, that's your date. That's the date, right? And I think I would just take the team and, well, you guys are great, okay, so the three of you are here, so you're hearing it. Okay?
Estelle.
You don't really need feedback from us. You're just sort of giving us a sense for where you're going, right?
No, he does need feedback.
You want us to, but to, I mean, okay, sorry. But you're not saying, do you like this version or that version at this point, right?
No, because we haven't even decided on which version we're gonna use yet. So
Okay.
we're still working on that.
Okay, so then I guess I should say, sorry. I like where you're heading with it. I think it's something that's gonna be really a wonderful tool for us. I think 50 programs is a lot to swallow, but it adds up to the 163 million, yes? So that's kind of the way we need to look at it. And then I guess when I kind of want to, I guess I don't want to micromanage what the data set looks like, because I'm sure we're all going to have 18 different points of how we like to look at things. So just generally, if we're getting the numbers we like and we can analyze it, I think you're heading in the right direction.
And Kathleen, just so you know, this is something that Tony's going to use to not only get to know the district, but then be able to evaluate what's going on.
There's a side benefit.
So it's actually
Good point. Timing's excellent.
a big benefit, so.
Right. Good.
So it's really a tool for all of the administration to use to have those discussions, so that when we come to you saying, this is what we really think that this is a priority for us to delve into deeper,
Right.
so that we can really find out what we've got
Yeah.
and what direction we should go. Then we'll come to you and we'll say, this is what we've discovered, because it's a tool for the administration to start those discussions, and then we come to you with the discussion and say, this is what we found. So together, which direction do you think that we should go? We think this way because this is what the information is sharing with us and telling us, but you might have a different idea, so we take that idea. So it really will begin to be a collaborative process, but the tool itself is really for our benefit, so that we have all that data and information and a common language across the board, because Eunice's language is different from the kind of language that we've been using in the strategic plan and the reports and things like that.
I understand. I think it's works. I think that other school districts will follow this model, honestly.
Ms. Raymond?
So, sorry, I think too, what it was also supposed to do is inform us at budget time, because if we did have to make cuts, there was an opportunity to see what might be costing money that's not having the impact that we desire. And then I think it's a way to bring new things to the board as well. It's like a framework to present new ideas.
Ms. O'Neill?
Is there any thought of bringing in an outside consultant to take a look at it when it's through, when it comes down to the sticky part of finding efficiencies?
Not for next year.
Well, not for next year, but yeah, it's possible for the next budget, yeah.
Mr. Chair?
I guess I don't understand that, Ralph. Can you, why are you saying no impact for next year? Why are you, what's in your head when you're thinking that?
Well, Peter, we're still going to be working on it next year. So it's not going to be a completed document. We may not get to the point where we're going to say, this is a mini review, this is a facilitated review. So I don't want to promise something I can't deliver.
Yeah, but wait a second. Maybe, because we're in a treat format here, it's more of a discussion than a formal meeting. Barbara, were you were talking about somebody on the outside, and you were talking about identifying efficiencies, and I think I heard Ralph say, yeah, don't expect that, which is, I'm hearing, don't expect this thing to help identify efficiencies. Maybe that's not what I meant, but that one I'm pausing on, because I understand that this is a layered thing, and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper, but it's not, to me, it's not binary. It's not, this is not the light is turned on, the light is turned off, right? We're gonna now have much more informed information by September 30th, right? So I'm just trying to bridge those two things of what you meant and what you meant, because I would think this thing is absolutely going to tool. We have stuff we already have to restore next year. So, and I don't hear anybody walking around saying, oh, magic, we're gonna get a 5% budget increase. So we really have to think about how this, maybe it's a board, maybe it's more a board discussion, how the board's gonna use this thing to evaluate the budget in November that the administration is presenting. I don't know, what were you guys thinking here of how this would be deployed for next year?
Well, again, next year, once we finish all the snapshots, once we're ready to go, then we would decide what would need a mini review and what would need a facilitated review. I think we can find a lot of efficiencies through the mini reviews, and as I said, if we want to bring somebody in to help us facilitate a review of a program, we'd have to put that in the budget for the, yeah.
Ms. Dean?
I would like to see a prioritization of academic programs over our back office. I know you're reviewing both in that 50 number, but if you're going to do a deep dive, I'd like that to be focused on classroom impact, student impact. And I don't know if you have in your heads, oh, we can take on only 3 of those deep dives, or 5 is fine. Do you have a limit to the number of programs that will be included in a deeper review?
We haven't discussed a number, and we're just gonna take it as it comes. If we see something that's sticking out, then we're gonna take it on. I think, although, and I agree with you, the academic programs are what we're here for. We have a lot of programs on the operations side that we could actually take a look at and find efficiencies as well. So I don't think we should limit ourselves.
Right, but the deeper dives, if you're spending money, I'd like that to be academic programs.
Dr. Francis?
So 2 things, going back to the timing and budget impact. I think it's going to be hard if you're sort of finishing your inventory and then deciding which ones you're going to review to have that sort of in time for our November, December timeline. So I'm not sure how we're going to muddle through the next budget, but it just seems like that's going to be hard to do. Certainly I would anticipate that it may help us as we're evaluating for the budget after. In terms of, I think our academics for sure are our most important thing. That doesn't mean to me that they're the first place we want to look for efficiencies. So I might differ a little bit, Jennifer, in terms of that comment. I'm not sure exactly the mini versus the deeper dive and the spending of money, but in any case, if we feel like there's a non-academic program that's right for us to save money, then it seems to me that makes sense to look at it, because then maybe we'll have more money for the academic pieces. So I would differ a little bit on that thought. I would probably want to go for the ones that seem ripest, if there's some way we can figure that out, for us to be able to recruit money from them in a way that will help us overall in terms of our budget. And then, maybe for our, I guess for our later discussion, I'm sort of looking at timeframes as we go back to look at our planning for next year. But a question that I would have, and if you're not ready to answer that, that's fine, but looking at when we had retreats, one of the thoughts I had was, the September 5th retreat, would that be a time to just show us in more detail the snapshots and the inventory, and then look at potentially October 5th retreat as, okay, how are we now prioritizing, and so that the board is kind of seeing these steps as they go along potentially. So I wasn't sure, because it looked like the end of September was when you had the inventories and the priorities done, but whether that inventory work might be done early enough for us to be able to see that September 5th, and then go on to the prioritization or kind of review and decision-making for review at that next one.
Gaetan, I think that's a great idea to do that. Yeah, I think we could swing that one.
Okay, so we're taking it up tonight, we'll,
Right.
yeah, we'll add it on.
Just for later.
All right, Ms. Olson?
Thank you for doing this, and I'm sorry I came in at for the tail end of this. Do we have a copy? I mean, we don't have a copy yet of what you presented.
We're going to post it next week.
Okay, perfect, because I want to catch up on what I missed, so apologies for that. In terms of getting, more concrete data, I think it's really important, and in terms of taking a deeper dive of academic, non-academic, they actually are quite connected. A lot of academic and non-academic programs are very much play off of one another and are very much interconnected. So I think we need more information before saying a hard, fast rule like this, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. So in order to spend more money looking into it. I think it's gonna be tricky with the timeline a little bit because, for budget season, as was said, but, I'll take a look at this too once it's posted. But, thank you for starting this work, and it seems like it clearly is a lot, and it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be quite useful, so thanks.
All right, other discussion on this item? Mr. Sheriff? As I understand it, to try to wrap this up, they're going to continue their work. They will come back, hopefully at our retreat on October 5th. September 5th, at the first one.
Yeah.
They will come back and give us an update on at that point. Anything else? All right, with that, thank you. Laura, get your concert. I'd like to win both. Okay, next up is going to be a strategic plan update.
All right, so as we enter year 5 of the strategic plan, we're very proud of the accomplishments to date, specifically change in educator practice. I have to comment here that it's not easy to move people and to change their adult actions. It really is not. And we have been seeing that change happen slowly over the last 4 years to help, to make learning personal for our students, and it's really starting to take hold. We have data for that, and we'll discuss that later when with wave numbers and everything like that in our walkthroughs. But it really is. This is not easy. People, teachers, and anybody else. Nobody likes change. As one of my assistant principals used to say to me, the only people that like change are wet babies. But we have to keep pushing them, and we are. And I think it's when you go, and if you can get into a school to go watch this in action, that's when you're going to see the transformation in services to the students. Anyway, so we've accomplished a lot in that, in educator practice, curriculum design, and in delivery. We are, our educators, as I said, they're growing. The social and emotional health of all learners is improving because of making learning personal. And we are engaging our families in a different way than we've ever engaged them before. I think, when people used to talk about family engagement, they were talking about how many people came to the PTA meeting. That's not how we're engaging our families any longer. We want them to be partners in their child's education, and that's our route. We will share outcomes to date specific to schools and classrooms and what the plans are for the future to maintain our momentum. This will include specific strategies and how we look forward to what we keep, delete, substitute with the board and community as we develop the next iteration of the strategic plan. So I've heard enough of my voice, so I'm going to invite our principal and our coordinator here to talk about what's going on in their programs and in their schools. Yeah, go ahead.
So just to add, we felt that it was important to at least hear from our representatives out in the building and the work that they're doing programmatically, and then at the school level instead of just us. There's a lot going on, so these two raised their hands, and we're super grateful. And certainly the teachers have a lot to say, but they're here to speak to that on some of the impact on the buildings, the classrooms, the programs, and certainly the learners. So thank you, Tom Healy, principal of Central Middle School, and Jeremy Boland, our physical education, family consumer science coordinator. And they have a few things to share. I will add that they joined us. We were able to go as a team through some grant funding to a personal learning summit in Atlanta. It was a team of 9, so it was great that it wasn't just a party of 1 or a party of 2. And we have some great things to bring back. So,
Thank you. Jeremy has graciously allowed me to go first, so appreciate that. I've had the opportunity to speak in front of you. We've done the middle school report and updates and things recently, so some of this stuff may sound a bit familiar, but really in the 3 years that I've been at Central in terms of working to implement the district strategic plan, our primary focus has really been to elevate the vision of the graduate and the capacities of the vision of the graduate to ensure that it is a common part of what we do in all aspects of sort of the school day. So we have talked with teachers about ensuring that their learning outcomes, or whatever is posted in terms of lessons and units for what students are to get out of the learning, there is a link to capacities of the vision of the graduate, at least a capacity of the vision of the graduate. In terms of changing our instructional practice, the soft entry point that sort of we came at as an administrative team at Central has been really about what is student-centered learning and what does it really mean to sort of shift the dynamic of the classroom to put the students at the center of the learning, and then leveraging the strategic plan and its core elements. Really, at this point, we've talked a lot about what does it mean to help make students partners in learning. This particular year, especially in math and language arts departments with those teachers, they've emphasized goal setting and conferencing. And so that we, in going through our end of year conferences with teachers, that's come back as something that has been noted as very beneficial in the experience. I think not only does it help us keep eyes on hard data points and actual student achievement and growth and have those conversations, but it hits the other end of things, which is important in middle school or at all levels really, which is the connection between the student and the teacher. And so we keep emphasizing with teachers, or at least my team and I really emphasize with teachers that I think when we first heard personalized learning, there was this idea that it was this thing that I had to figure out and implement. And we've tried to really capture the fact that what making learning personal is, it's getting back to the fact that learning is a human endeavor. It requires relationships and connections and focus on the individual at times, but also structure our classrooms so we have time to do that. So that's really what our work has been. So really, if I were to boil it down to how we are sort of implementing the strategic plan in real time at Central, it's really figuring out how we help to elevate students as partners in learning. And then really the next, for those teachers who have sort of got that already, it's really the student ownership. So how do we then structure lessons where most of the heavy lifting by the teachers is being done prior to a lesson and then reflecting afterwards, so that during that 46-minute period, the students are really working hard and asking the questions, and the student discourse is increasing. So our work as an administrative team through our observations and evaluations and walkthroughs has been taking data on things like student-to-student discourse versus teacher talk, and how much time and percentage of the class period is being commanded by the teacher versus driven by the students. And we've seen growth in the last 2 years as we've started to really focus on that, and that's been very exciting. Additionally, at the middle school level with our capstone kind of just finishing, we have really looked at taking that capstone experience, and I've been purposeful about changing the name from Capstone Project, which gives you that second semester, 8th grade, oh my gosh, entity, to Capstone Experience, really like what this is a culmination of my learning up to this particular point. And I've had my team of 8th grade teachers and our instructional coaches and others come through to really help us make sure there's a clear alignment between what they're doing and the capacities of the vision of the graduate, and that students are reflecting on that. So it's actually happening right now in real time. Well, not at this time, but during the school day, is that our teachers are actually coaching in on the students, and they're talking about the capstone experience, having gone all the way up to May 30th presenting it, and having them reflect on strengths and areas for growth related to the vision of the graduate. So what did you see when you think about these capacities really you did well, and what do you think are areas that you still would like to focus on or need to focus on to be the best student, best version of yourself? So that's really where we are right now in terms of what's happening in the classrooms, and I invite you all to come in anytime. We love visitors, of course, maybe not the last week of school, but starting in the fall, everyone's welcome. I've seen a few of you there, so thank you for that. And then sort of just in relation to the opportunity to go to the PL Summit, what was wonderful was there was a little bit of for me, a sort of appreciation for how far I feel like we are, because sometimes I think, have we gotten that far as you're trying to get people to change practice? You sometimes don't feel like you're making as much progress. But one of the first breakout sessions that Jill Flood, Trish McGuire, and myself were in, we were talking about what it what it means to make classrooms look more like the future and less like the past was really the topic. And we ended up presenting to the rest of the table how our teachers have used curriculum playlists to help students get toward the center of the learning and have more time to explore topics at their own particular pace, how that frees up teachers to have one-on-one conferences and connect with kids. And no teacher, there were about 4 or 5 others from places like Tennessee and New York, had even heard of a curriculum playlist. So that I kind of was a little surprised by, especially at the summit. I thought kind of everybody was there. So that was affirming in our work. But then there were other things that I went to that were really helpful, which were more about professional collaboration. I went to a session on highly effective and functioning teams, and got some ideas to come back, especially in that middle school model and that teaming model. How can we ensure that our teams are operating at a high frequency, at a high pace, focused on student outcomes? So that was really great. And then for next year, we're really going to continue this. And really the goal at this point is really helping the teachers in-house see what other colleagues are doing, so that we can share practices across our classrooms. We've sort of had to build trust, and we've been encouraging risk-taking over the last few years, and we've seen those risks being taken, but that has to happen first before you can then say, okay, now open your door and let people come in and see what you're doing. So we're now at a point where there are teachers who are comfortable and confident enough in what they've done and the outcomes that they've seen from kids to be open to saying, sure, you can bring some people by and we can do that. So we're planning on orchestrating a structure for next year to make more teacher to classroom visits with in-house. And I say this all with the acknowledgement that I am fortunate that I work very closely with Gordon and Jason at Eastern and Western. And while we would always love to get into each other's schools more often, we do share those ideas regularly. And obviously when the office is there too, we meet regularly, we share regularly, we invite each other to the extent that we can make it to each other's schools to see what's going on. So as much as we may be doing that in-house, we're also doing it that way. And our vertical articulation as well, especially with our elementary school, our feeder schools, and having the kids come in. So that's sort of my update.
Thanks, Tom.
Had I known I'd have been following that, I wouldn't have returned for my first address to the board. Thank you. But I want to say how grateful and thankful I was to be able to go to the PL Summit in Atlanta. As I'm stepping into this new role, I had to figure out personalized learning for myself and what that's going to look like in phys ed, health, and family and consumer science. And I was surprised to sit down in my first session of the conference as we were going through problem solving, using the design process of problem solving. I was actually able to lead the discussion. I was surprised as to how much I had internalized just over the course of the last few years as a teacher, to be in that role, in that conference, leading that discussion. So that was a surprise for me. In terms of what's going on here in the district for phys ed, and we've concentrated on personalized learning as our primary goal in the strategic plan. There have been a couple of schools, at least 2, that have been part of Wave 2, and I've been able to get out and visit them and see what's taking place. And the one I'd like to talk about is the goal-setting strategy that's been being used at North Street. The impact that it's had on the students is complete ownership and empowerment over what they would like to accomplish within the classroom, primarily with fitness. Once that baseline data is collected, now the students know how hard they have to work and what exactly they need to do to reach the goal that they've set for themselves. So to see the students really taking the leadership over their personal fitness and health and well-being was pretty empowering, especially in this role now. I've got some classrooms, some schools where it's already taking place. And now during Wave 3, I look to expand this to all the schools, all the teachers within the program. It works. I've seen it happen. So now we just need to make it happen everywhere. In comparison to some, I'll say, states, I don't know exactly how many, I had attended the National Phys Ed Conference, and in a session where they were displaying a examination of different physical education curriculum models, no one is using personalized learning in phys ed. So the more that we here in Greenwich can integrate personal learning strategies in phys ed, we could potentially be taking the lead on this as a whole new component of the physical education curriculum. So that was pretty exciting. So it's a goal of mine now is to continue to expand personalized learning in phys ed. Let's see. I think that was it. Sorry, I can't match the length of time.
We all want personal trainers, so thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Can I just say one more quick thing?
No,
Because,
Tom, you're done.
we have to, I don't know if I was clear enough, we have to credit the work of the teachers and their willingness to really get out of their comfort zone and change their practice, because some of them have been doing some things for a while and they're really eager to see what the results are of the difference, and they're working really hard at it, and they're eager to learn, and they're thirsty for that knowledge, and so that's really where all this is happening.
It's also really cool to see your kids take their own data and develop their goals based on the data, and they understand the data, and they understand what they need to work on based on the data and coaching from their teachers. And so it's one of the nice, really great parts of this Making Learning Personal that we started. I started that 2 years ago at Eastern with reflection of and self-assessment of student work. And it really is something that puts our kids, gives our kids a great jump on others, because this is something that really is advanced, and it's something that is really cool. So I don't know how superintendents said how cool something is, but that's it. Anyway, our future plans for not our future plans, our plans for next year are in pages, in the document, in pages 6 through 13, and there's a ton of them, and I don't want to read them to you, but they're in leadership, they're in management, they're in curriculum, they're in instruction, obviously, and family and community engagement, which, and if you look at the family and community engagement one, you can see where we're going with that, and how we're going to be a little bit different than, two of our schools are going to be a little bit different than the rest of the district, and thanks to Kimmy's and the Grange Alliance, we have a grant for them to be able to do that. So that may be something that the rest of the district takes on in the following year. So good stuff going on, and we're not sitting on our hands. We're moving forward with multiple plans for next year in all those areas. So if you have any questions about any of those areas, please don't hesitate. Ketan, you have an update about the last ad hoc committee? I wasn't trying to surprise you.
Yeah, so we met, I think, to boil down, I think it was a 2+ hour meeting to, we can probably actually say it in a few sentences. I think what we really felt after we had reviewed the tiles, looked at the data, how things are collected, that there's probably, a real need for us in the process of moving forward to fully understand and review our current plan. And part of the discussion was sort of what's the best way to do that? Do we do that sort of more internally? Do we do that externally? And when we get to the next section, that's part of what we incorporated in terms of our plan for next year in terms of meetings. And so I can sort of, I think, include that. We've got another meeting coming up on Tuesday, June 18th. Tony's going to be here with us for that, and so I think that'll be a nice transition time for us to really start thinking more about the plans for next year.
Thank you, Ketan. One of the other things that we talked about earlier in the strategic plan was TEPL, and Ian didn't get a chance to present anything about TEPL because she got to go to Atlanta and I didn't. So, Ian, is there anything you want to update the board on in terms of strategic plan and TEPL?
The 4 new indicators we developed a rubric for each one, and we have begun professional learning for our administrators and teachers, because next year you had given all of us a pass for 3 years not to be rated on those indicators, so it will begin next year. And also our TEPL 2 document has now been aligned with the rubrics from SESS, so we are in direct alignment with the state. And hopefully next meeting you will approve the 2 TEPL documents and their updates so that I can send them to the state and we can be approved by the state.
Dr. Francis, do you want to add to that?
So I'm going to be a board member now. I find all this personalized learning so exciting, and it's something, honestly, I've been rooting for long before I was on the board. But I do have to ask the question of how are we evaluating it? You know, so it's exciting to hear, okay, this school is working on, you know, personalized learning in gym, and it's really exciting to see them do that. And there's changes that are happening in the classroom. Clearly, in circumstances where we have different schools doing different things, it seems like we should be able to look at how is that affecting our students differently. You know, we obviously look at academic data, but that's a small piece of it. So this could be, I'm more engaged in my classroom. I'm more excited to go to gym. You know, I'm not saying it has to be an academic number, but I think it'd be really useful not only for us, because I think we're supporting it, but it's really nice to hear those kinds of things. But, you know, again, when we're going out, as we've talked about, hopefully at some point, sort of communication, as we go out and try and promote our strategic plan and ask for money for these things, to be able to say, look at how that has had a positive impact on student engagement in these classrooms when you compare kids going to these two different types of classrooms. So to try and think as we're doing this, particularly as we're looking at this phase of waves, as we're looking at some places are doing something and some aren't, or there's differences, you know, how do we show how that impact is happening?
So that would be the next, I'm sorry. So that would be the next part of the presentation, how we are evaluating that through the blended learning walkthroughs and the protocol that Irene and her team have been following throughout the year, right? Yeah.
Yes, I agree. You want to know that this is having an impact, right? Instead of just anecdotal, you want to see all evidence. So what I'm going to pass around is I have a copy of, because this is a retreat, so that we can do a deeper dive in some of the resources that we created and put in place to support this work and to then observe and quantify in some way, which there are data tables starting on page 18 in the document, as well as new things that we've learned for going forward, so the future. So there's 2 items in here for the future, so I'm just going to pass this around real quick.
Are you going to talk about this?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone get a copy. Receives a copy?
And also make the connection into Temple.
Yeah.
Gaetan, I'm going to respectfully disagree with that whole line of thinking, okay? And this is what makes me a little frustrated with this, and I just want to verbalize it, because here it is live and in living color. The board already set what the outcomes and measures are. So when you raise that as, hey, how would I see the evidence of that? I think that can be, it's disruptive to the organization, because it takes their focus off of, hey guys, you go, this is the difference between governance and management. You know, Ralph and administrators like to talk about the board not micromanaging, and they're right, okay? Because the reality of it is our job is to say, we're looking for these outcomes. It's their job to figure out how to do that every day. And if they use them as strategies, that's not the right word, but okay, I'll use the EduSpeak word. The strategies I'm using in the classroom. If it's not yielding the results, then it's not, it might be a great thing, we might feel good about it, but we spend a lot of time figuring out how are we going to manage the outcome, and if it doesn't do that outcome, then as educators, you guys probably need to go back to the drawing board, right? And it's bad when the board gets into, in my view, the board gets inside that and starts picking that, because we're not the educators, right? So, and I think I've said this before, Irene, I'm delighted to hear how you're measuring the inputs in your process, but as a board member, I'm interested in it, but I'm also very sensitive to, as a board member, I should not have you present that to us, because that's a step. No, I understand that, but that's us stepping into what you guys, how you're going to run the district, and that steps on top of your discretion as educators, as a board, which I want to say strongly. I don't think board members. I think we need to be very careful stepping over that line, because that puts us into not being in the role of governance and oversight. It puts us into the role of management, which is, I don't think that's where we should be. I'm very interested in, it's great we're doing wave 3, it's great professional development is going on, it's great that the practice is being changed in the classroom, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't move the needle on any of the indicators that we've set, which are, there's a set of academic ones, but there are also indicators that are about student engagement. So they're not just this, it would be a complete misread, and that should be corrected every time we hear it. Because the board said we are interested in having academic outcomes, and they're very clear. We're interested in having social outcomes, we're interested in having emotional outcomes, we're interested in having physical fitness and health outcomes. The dashboard is very comprehensive, and one of them that's on there is about student satisfaction, student engagement. The big problem was, by the way, they still haven't figured out how to measure it. So I think we did that part of the work, and I'm just hoping that the administration every day is thinking about what am I doing that's moving the needle on those strategic measures that are the strategic measures for the whole district, not just the board.
I appreciate the comments, certainly, and over the years of presenting different monitoring reports, and are we providing the right information for you to make the decisions to support the work at the district level, the building, and the classroom level. So there was, at one time, we say that classroom walkthroughs and observations is one of our mechanisms to assure and ensure that this is happening. And I think it was Ms. Dayton who said, how do we know? We'd like to see some of that information. So I'm not troubled by sharing this information, because I do think it's important that you know and understand how we're going into the classrooms in a systematic way. There's a couple of things that we're trying to do. What's the purpose of that walkthrough? How are we coaching the administrative team in that protocol to look for those strategies, those outcomes that we set? If we do these 3 things within the 3 critical elements, we will move the needle. That's our intention, and we're strongly committed to that. So the numbers may not statistically look the greatest, but it's of these observations, of those 505 observations and observers that we have done since the beginning of the school year, we are making significant gains, and we're seeing the change in practice, and as measured through that walkthrough. That's the best we can offer right now, and we're proud of that. Now, the assessment data will be reported in the summer, and we'll have that achievement report. So again, our intention, and we do expect that there's going to be some growth there. With that, I wanted to make sure that you understood, we talk about the playbook, and we throw out terms like curriculum playlist. So the playbook was written and designed for teachers to kind of soften the noise that's out there with personal learning. You can name any researcher, they've written a book about it, right? Any one of us could write a book about it. So we wanted, our intention for the playbook was to take all of that noise, distill it down into a manageable document that also articulates our commitments and connect the dots as well. Connect the dots to the strategic plan, connect the dots to the vision of the graduate, and then land on what are the 3 critical elements of personal learning that is going to make the greatest difference for our kids, for Greenwich. And that's what we did. So it's partners in learning, student ownership, and student regulation. Within there, as you go through the book past page 9, I strategically put your papers in by page 9. As you go through there, we've outlined, well, what does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like for parents, for the students, and for the teachers? And that's what we use as our mechanism, our lens, if you will, going into the classrooms. Also in the playbook, you will notice a lot of other strategies for administrators. And nothing is a gotcha. This is shared with the teachers so they know they're partners with us. Towards the back, you'll see our it looks like a bingo board. I think it's page 24, around there, page 24. Those were the leverageable plays that we felt are the best practices, the strategies that are going to make them the biggest difference. It was also a way to show that we have a lot of assets in the district, so how are we going to build on them? How do we elevate those? And yes, one of those plays is curriculum playlist. You heard a lot about that. I didn't expect all of the teachers to gravitate to that, but it was a quick win because finally teachers could see this is a structure I can implement in my classroom that not only accounts for the physical resources that we, all of us, we put in place for the teachers, but the digital resources as well. They finally were able to ask the right questions about, so it's not about using Nearpod, I'll just throw that one out, I could throw any digital tool out, but this is what I want as an outcome for the learners, and will Nearpod be the vehicle to do it? Will it be EduCreations? Will it be IXL? And so you can name any one of them. So what you have also in your packet are samples of, if you look at this one that's paper clipped, I wanted to give you a sample from K-12. So the first page is our core components of a curriculum playlist. This is what we vetted last year to ensure that when you make a playlist, it's not just go out there and create one. This is our commitment, that these things have to be considered. It's almost like a rubric. You have to consider these items in order to make a playlist that's going to have impact on teachers and students. This is a coachable document for us. It has been. It's been part of our professional learning to assure that teachers consider all things. And if you notice, we have at the bottom, we say, before you launch, consider where you are in the playlist, because it's not just create it, give it to the teachers, to the students, and just you're off. You yourself, as the educator, need to be shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye, and make sure that students have an opportunity to come to you. Behind that page are samples of the different playlists. One, you're going to see the template. So again, talking about putting conditions in place for the teachers, we created a research-based template. So this is based on a number of things nationwide. And we gave this to teachers that, again, you're not going out there creating your own diet. This is what you want to have within your template. Now, through implementation, do teachers modify? Absolutely, because we want to allow for that remixing, if you will. But they were still accountable for these core components. So behind the template, which is blank, you're going to see a real live playlist from Julie and Curtis for grade 2 mathematics. You'll see one from our FLES program created by a teacher at New Lebanon. Then you're going to see a 6th grade science one that, again, for considering the age and the engagement of that learner, they mixed it up and made it like a game board. Then the next one you see is from a social studies course at our high school for 11th grade, and this is only 2 pages. There's more to it because she embedded the self-reflection and executive functioning for management. So that's a curriculum playlist in a nutshell, but they're much more than just saying, here's all the digital tools and then have a go. The next thing, the next 2 things I provided for you, because it's, again, from that information, from all of those walkthroughs that we did, we do want to increase the intervisitation as Tom had spoken of, and that happened a lot. Teachers were saying, I want to see where this is happening. Where can I go? Glad you asked. You can go right to one of our partner schools in district. So we're having groups of teachers as colleagues going to see this in other classrooms with our kids, with our grades. So new for next year, you'll see it in the future column, we're creating something called a Welcoming Classrooms Toolkit. So can I ask for your finger to hold this down? And we tested this out last week, and it was phenomenal. So basically, all of the classrooms for wave 1, 2, and 3 will have this pocket outside their door, and it's, welcome to my classroom. And teachers will create a snapshot of their classroom, because again, as you're coming in, teachers have that anxiety, that moment of like, well, let me just quickly tell you what we're working on and what we did prior to this to get to this point. This removes all of that. So behind the template that we created for the teachers, you'll see a real one that was in action from Glenville at grade 5, I'm sorry. So again, the way this would work is the snapshots are outside the classroom in the pocket, so whoever is visiting, board members, teachers, colleagues, the principal can just take the snapshot, read it, and then they have some sample questions to ask the learners when they get into the classrooms. And what Glenville actually did said, our students are accustomed to visitors, so please ask these types of questions, and they're high-level questions, which then gets me to, I'll get to that. The other thing that was very critically important is that our teachers want feedback in the moment. So what I was able to create is this QR code that then goes right to a form. So you have the example of our feedback form. What happens is there's a drop-down menu embedded, and using an add-on called Autocrat, we're able, the visitor can give feedback to the host classroom and it goes to their email immediately so they get it in the moment, that timely feedback, right? Timely and effective feedback, but also celebrating the work that they're doing. So that, again, testing this out this week, the teachers said that was amazing to get the feedback right away and written, not just verbal. So the other thing that we learned from all of our implementations, more so this year than last year, is if we want to know what the students are thinking and how engaged they are and what they're learning, we have to ask better questions. It's not enough to just say, so tell me what you're doing. We have to ask them, what are you learning and why? How do you know? What data did you use to inform this? So that's why this is critical for next year. Again, another coaching document to help our building leaders and program leaders and the coaches and the teachers too, because you have to use these in your practice with the students. So if you notice, the way this works, there's our 3 critical elements connected right back to the playbook. If you want to look for this evidence in that middle column, then you need to start asking these questions. And that's the purpose of this document. So I think we should be proud of the year that we've had related to making learning personal and having the strategic plan come to life in our buildings in support of the vision of the graduate and in service of the vision of the graduate in all things we do. That these are some new learnings. We want to implement them next year and continue that work. And the last thing I'll say is that that's the power of a wave-based approach, because we are who we are at Havemeyer, the team that we have, and we're all phenomenal, and the principals are who they are. But by having a wave-based approach, we can have that concentrated support structure in place, and it actually allows them the opportunity to kind of prototype with that small group at the building level instead of going wholesale. Will we meet our target by 2020? Probably not, but I think we're being systematic and thoughtful in the work that we're doing, and I think we're at a point now where the people of wave 2 are surpassing wave 1, so really all waves roll up into each wave, and we're still moving along and implementing those strategies. So again, I said it before, I'm very proud of that work. But that is strategy 2, and that's where TUPL comes in, because that's teacher evaluation, professional learning. It's all part of that support structure, which adds in that other layer of how we are evaluating what we're doing. Thank you.
Mrs. Eaves, would you like to talk about what you're doing with that pilot, please?
Can we ask a couple?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's Francis.
So actually going back a little bit, I think to the presentations you guys have talked about, and I think that the point I brought up, and I think an excellent point, Peter, I think what I would say is to maybe alter a little bit what I said, but not necessarily talk about, which is, yes, I think, we are at the end of, here are the outcomes we're looking for. I think the kinds of things they're talking about are clearly part of our strategic plan and the outcomes we're looking for. We may not have the best tools. I think there's 2 things. One is to look at the tools that we've got to measure student engagement or other factors and say, is this really reflecting what we want? And as we look at that next wave of our next step or whatever of our strategic plan, are there better tools to get at what we think we want to see and to show what we're doing? I think the other point I was trying to make is that, given that this is not necessarily an overnight process, that it may be hard to move the needle on some of these things across the district when we only have a percentage of our students at a certain level of our strategy, of our personalized learning. So is there a way, when you know that you've got some places that are implementing certain things that others aren't, that you might look at smaller groups? So instead of looking at across the district how we move the needle on this particular measurement that's part of the dashboard, can we see that in fact, when you look at those people that are really implementing this new strategy, that does move the needle, even though we may not have seen it across the district yet. So it would be a way of looking at the subgroup and help us determine before we're at another 5 years of a new strategic plan to say, is the strategy seeming to help us?
Okay. Ms. Dayton and then Ms. Stubb.
I congratulate you on this incredible packaging of content for the teachers and the structure you provided so that everyone has a baseline to start from and they can use their creative abilities after they have the must-dos. They can expand from there, they can innovate from there, but it makes sense to have as much consistency as possible so that you know student outcomes are based on a single set of directions, and I think that's what you've done, so I really appreciate it. I wanted to talk about the walkthrough data. Are we ready for that, or do you have an intro, or can I go right into that? Okay. So if you don't mind, in the original board packet, on page 16, the walkthrough purpose, Partners in Learning is the title of it. My one imperative is teacher use of data, and everything else seems to be very, very strong, except for that one area, but I want you to give me color and context.
So the evidence of data being used to support learning, is that the area?
Yes.
Right. So when we do the walkthrough, we do follow a protocol, and we do provide the teachers and the administrators come with me, coordinators who have attended. We don't have teachers on those teams just yet, because again, this is year one, and establish that baseline, if you will. So we provide that purpose for the observation, and it's for 10 minutes. We want to get in and get a snapshot. There's no judgment, and that's based on research from Marzano and TeachScape and Classroom Walkthrough Protocol. And yes, we are finding that when we talk with the students, what data has been used or what evidence is being used to determine that activity or task that they're involved in. And so of those observations, that's where we're not seeing that. So again, that's an entry point for the building principals as they develop their SIP plan. It's an entry point for us when we develop professional learning and the pathways for that. So again, in the moment of asking students, how do you know, and you tie it back to those questions, what data do you have, or did you meet with the teacher to look at your assessment to say that this is where you're, I mean, again, the questions go deeper as we meet with the students. That's what we're not observing that enough, so that could be a future focus for us going forward.
You step.
Are you sure?
No, I was saying that you
Oh,
were, I wasn't
No,
trying
I
to
know
go.
Jennifer had tried to go
I was like,
before.
I think Kathleen.
Thank you.
She had a long-standing place marker.
Okay, so these two came out, so I have to ask them questions. But so I'm specifically going to pick on my principal, right? So, because Thomas and William are home right now with a screen, and there's a lot going on, because they're definitely making learning personal at home. So my question is, you have, it says only 7 teachers so far that are in this personalized learning. But there's no way I've managed to hit all 7. So is it happening, like, are you going further? Are you having cross-training within the school? What's happening that is beyond this?
So, I don't have that in front of me. So the 7 teachers
So it
is in
says that
reference
you
to.
only have had
In your wave.
In
your wave. Number of
For
teachers that you
wave
had
two?
identified, yes.
So those are teachers that I specifically identified to be a core body to sort of take the lead on things, but I would not say those are the only 7 teachers that are implementing strategies related to everything we've discussed. It's well beyond that. But when we looked at trying to bring teachers in who would be open to interclassroom visits and sort of that PLC model of what is working, I started in year 1 with that group that were really my kind of go-getters to really start a strong foundation to then expand. But if you look across the board, it's not going to be like this is only happening in 7 classrooms. That's not an accurate representation. It's really just for the purpose of working with a team. Anything beyond that, I felt would be too large a team to really make any real headway.
If I can add, that is happening across the board, and we've heard that there's been bleed, if you will. So there's excitement, and as people are doing it, like, hey, I like that. What are you doing over there? Can I see that? And that actually happened from wave 1, which was our pilot. So at Julian Curtis, you had a 3rd and a 4th grade teacher. Grade 2 saw what was happening, and they were doing it last year. So then they became part of wave 2. And now wave 3, again, that this saturation is happening, and she's got a larger team this year because of their work, and which she's really designed to what Trish McGuire and Brenda Brush have designed in sharing out at faculty meetings, having the PLC model implemented. She'll probably have her whole school launched, if you will, through each wave by the end of 2021.
Can I just follow
If you
up?
can do it by the numbers.
Can I just follow up on that, because that was actually a question I had. which is if there's an appetite, can we move faster?
Of course we can, but we do want to be careful of the support structure that we can provide. If it is too large, there's only one of me, one of Anne, and the superintendent, and again, we want to make sure that they do have the support and access to those that are going to help sit down with them and provide embedded professional learning. The coaches are a huge force in all of that, but again, we are who we are. But yes, absolutely.
Please.
It's not enough to just give them the playbook and these resources and say, have a go. I need to be mindful and go into the classrooms and working with the principal and having different meetings. We need to make sure that the coaches are available. Other teachers again, you need a support structure to do this. You can't just give it and let them take off.
Yeah, no, I get that part. I'm sorry, I just heard you reference you and Anne. And it was,
We're part of the support structure.
Yeah, but there's no scalability in you two whatsoever. Zero.
Well, I would say the building leaders.
You have a full-time job and she has a full-time job, right? And,
Yes.
right? So, well, that's really my question. Are every single coach we have only doing this?
No, there's other work at the building level that just drive the work of the SIP plan. But it's part of building the capacity of our building leaders as well, because they're helping each other. So when we're not there, as Tom said, he's working with Gordon and Jason, and they're figuring out another way or developing another way to support each other, having those intervisitations.
And then my second question on all this comment is, has there been a professional learning day, because we have many of them during the year, that is every teacher in the district has had to sit in the pack and go over this?
Not all 900 of them at one single time, but we have created, it was a workshop called, So What's This Playbook Anyway, and how's it going to help me and my students? So those I have delivered with the coaches, and then I train them, and then the coaches deliver it. So we're not we've captured all of those that are in each wave, because that was a primary focus. So we will continue that. All teachers will get a copy. They have a copy of the playbook digitally. They're going to get a physical copy next year. And yes, there's planned. But we made sure all of the wave participants were trained.
I mean, I don't want to tell you how to run your shop, but if
Are you down for board level?
yeah.
You said you didn't want to micromanage.
Wow. No, I don't want to micromanage, but I do want to know, this is let me finish this, okay? Is, as a board, we approve all the resources. We decide programs and we decide what money goes to what programs. And that's the reason why we didn't talk about this. It's funny, this playbook, I kept my mouth shut, but now I won't. 8 years ago when we redid the budget book, Jennifer Dayton, Peter Von Braun and I, this exact thing that's in the snapshot is what was in the budget book by program. Every program person was supposed to present that when they presented their budget. It's kind of funny, and I was just thinking to Lori, we got some bright idea to abandon that between Jim and what have you, so it all got lost, and here we are, a dedicated project to recreate it. It's kind of funny. So we're approving this stuff. My point would be, because we've had a conversation about coaches, and we have to approve professional development. I would have thought, and this would be my oversight question, that in a land of scarce resources, right, we'd say, if our entire strategic plan hinges on professional, personalized learning in the classroom, if I don't have as much resources, I'm going to say, every coach, that's your only job, because I'd love to have 20 of you, but I don't have 20 of you, I only have 10 of you, or how many we have. And we have to say everything else gets dropped by the wayside, because the trick is to get to personalized learning as quickly as possible and as many teachers as possible. That would be my first comment. My second comment would be, I know how we run PL. We're really proud of our PL catalog, and we're really proud of the professional learning. We're really proud of when it's a professional development day, we bring in cool people and teachers can pick what they think they need. Okay? I'm okay with that. But I would have thought what we would do is say, Okay, on this day, because I don't know how many do we have during the year? 3, 4, 5, 6 professional learning? 3 full days when we tell parents you gotta watch out for your kid. Okay, which is kind of inconvenient if you talk to parents. But I understand that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
We don't want our kids.
My point would be, I would have thought we would have structured a curriculum that was intro to PL, that we force the entire, like pick one day out of the year where we say, guess what, everybody, even though you're not gonna get supported in a wave, we need to have a deep indoctrination of what this is, do Q&As, so even when you're not supported, you can start to kind of do parts of this in your classroom every day. I would just love to see, this is to the point of the program, this is connecting the dots on programs. We spend a lot of money on these programs. Their monies, we're never going to change what we spend on these programs. But what we have to do is always be looking at how do we make more bang out of our buck, to Peter's point, faster for the investments that we're making. And the hard part of that stuff is never deciding what to do. That's how we wind up with budgets in Greenwich Public Schools. Are always about more. I think I've said this before. But what we've got to do, I think, and the board has to support the administration in this, is some things we're going to have to stop doing so we can take those resources and allocate them to, with like, we'll put lots of wood behind the arrows, so to speak. And we've got to back you up. So if somebody starts whining and complaining that, hey, you used to do, sorry, we're not going to do that anymore because we've redeployed all the resources behind the strategic initiative.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with the professional learning, we're super focused on making learning personal for the classroom. So if you were to look at the program of studies, and I think you see them because you're on that group email, if you really take a deep dive into those sessions that we provide, and it's not just external consultants, we have over 147 teachers that presented this year. Teachers teaching teachers, our colleagues. All of those options that were provided were specifically in service of the 3 critical elements. So teachers were choosing, again, based on their level of readiness and understanding or need, based on their professional practice goal, which is aligned with TEPL, was specific to mindfulness, social emotional learning, working with students that come with trauma, how I deal with my secondary trauma. So everything was in service of this. It may not have been the playbook, force feeding the playbook, but it was specific to those needs that they've identified in order to meet the needs of the learner. So I'm happy to reshare those programs and study, but the money was in support of making learning personal in the strategic plan.
So I get that, but I think, Peter, I'm not going to speak for you, but I think the idea of a 101 course at the early end, even if people aren't in the wave, just to get them in the mindset, this is coming, I can get there faster, there are places I can go, people I can see in my own building, 7 in your school. And right, and you said JC is the example. One grade was doing it, the other one discovered it, right? The Glenville example you have here, it's a teacher that actually says right in the thing, I'm not in wave 1 or 2, right? And they're doing it anyway, so we want to encourage that.
Yes, and we can.
Mr. Healy, as you're referred to in my house.
I just wanted to clarify, and it kind of goes back to what the data reads versus what's actually happening. So I also referenced the fact that all of my math teachers and all of my language arts teachers are engaged in goal setting and conferencing as a strategy to help students become partners in learning. They're not all captioned. That's 18 teachers, right? So that's 18. Some of them were in overlap, but that 7 was a cross section of all of my departments and all 3 grade levels. So I selected those 7 to be the first phase so that I had a point person in each department and in each grade level who was really getting that deeper dive into what the PL playbook was, to then make sense of it, change it into their colleagues speak so that they could talk to each other about it. But making learning personal was happening in other areas of the building because it was happening at all 3 grade levels in language arts and in math through goal setting and conferencing. But it wasn't like stated as, you're using the playbook or this is how we're doing it. It was more a natural entry point for teachers to become comfortable with this idea of connecting with kids, using data to have a conversation. And then it's sort of like that. And guess what? This falls right in line with this resource. But we did use at the beginning of the year during our pre-faculty meeting, we showed the PL playbook to the entire Central Middle School staff. We talked about the elements and we talked about how we were going to be phasing this in with certain representatives, but focusing on math and language arts because it connects to SBA and STAR, and then we could really use those departments to focus on goal setting and conferencing. So that doesn't necessarily capture exactly what is going on.
All right, Ms. Stone, do you have anything?
I do. I was just going to say, since data is so important, that you're actually further along than your percentages suggest, because unless you have 1,247 teachers, I think we have 900, so you might have done it out of all the employees, right? Out of all of our,
Where, I'm not sure.
so at the bottom of the table, you
Oh,
said
I'm
that.
sorry, okay.
So I think you're further along than you
Sure.
suggest, which is good. But I know you spoke for about 15 minutes, but what I got out of it was that moving faster would be better, and anything that we could do to accomplish that would be great, because this does suggest we'd be sort of 2 years behind, right, of our original plan, which I know was 1,000 years ago, but anything we can do to expedite it would be wonderful.
Okay, Dr. Francis.
So at our last meeting, we were talking about how we should affirm or not so when statements are being made to try and give a more unified. And I would say, yes, it's great to move forward, but I would not agree with any specific recommendation as to how you do your professional learning, because I think you probably are more adept at figuring that out than we are.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Olson.
I always just have to have a positive note, but to our guest speaker, so you talked about the goal setting. I actually saw it in my kitchen floor. My kids came home and were like, because I have North Street students, so I saw them come home and say, I don't know if it's crunches or sit-ups or what they're doing, but they're like, I reached my goal. And they started doing like 100 crunches on the kitchen floor. 2.5-year-old was like jumping over them. It was quite a scene. I'm trying to cook, but it was, they'd set their goal, they reached it, and I'm like, I'm not quite sure that's how you're supposed to do it. You're gonna hurt your neck. It's like, but it was. I saw it. I see the excitement, and I went to Central Tom many years ago, and I wish I was there now because, no, seriously, because your energy and your enthusiasm is contagious, and like just, it's great to see like a natural born leader. I do think that the teachers will start teaching the teachers because you get them excited. And we have these, I always say these like undiscovered talent. Maybe those are the 7 you found that then are like, spreading the word. And the truth is, like, teachers do. They see what works in other classrooms. Like, I say this, maybe I'm managing, but it's actually my job. So I do see it every day, like teachers saying this worked, and that's what, like, some of that collaboration happens, like, at lunchtime, or, in passing time, like, hey, try this, or one of our distinguished teachers, Ms. Adele had said at her speech, like, at the speech, like, I get so many emails, take it or leave it, take what you like, use what you want, or forget it, no hard feelings, like, just, there's a lot of sharing that goes on, and so it might not really, look like this, but, we can see it, I've seen it, like I said, in my own kitchen. And this is, I also think it's really important for teachers to get the feedback when you go in right away. I would just maybe, again, I guess this is micromanage time, but I would take a look at the questions, because yes or no is like not necessarily as productive. Like, are students active, engaged? Are they doing something with the information presented to them? Yes, no. Some are active and others passive. Like, it's very rare when you have 100% of the kids 100% active. It's like, well, what's some, or yes or no? There's not a lot of room. It's good to get that information back, but a Google form like this maybe isn't quite. Maybe we could do more in terms of like how we word it.
It's teacher to teacher, so we wanted to be cognizant of that too.
Okay.
The
This is only teacher to
colleagues
teacher.
are giving the feedback to the teacher, and there are some admin on the team too. This is part of the welcoming classrooms, not this one.
Okay. Still, okay, that makes a little more sense,
we
but it's
just
just,
tested it.
and again, maybe that's not my
Sorry,
job today, guys, but that's, yeah. But yeah, it's exciting, and I'm not gonna roll back in Central at people's point, but it's exciting what's happening.
I think we both had the same principal
Anybody else? Ms. Dean?
I'd like to put another plug in for the individual learner profile to be sent to all parents. I know you're working on it, it may take more time. And I wondered, what do parents get in terms of a report card for the pilot participants? Is it the same as? It's the same. And in what year do you think we might see a report card aligned to the mastery system?
That could take a couple of years, because we have to run parallel so that we can have, like, that it's done from the inside out and get the outside in the understanding of it. So that process is an important process, and I want to make sure that parents can give feedback on both. So just to use as an example, they could potentially receive the report card of achievement in both formats to say, which do you like better, which is informing you most on your child's achievement. So that's going to take some time, but we're definitely working on it. I don't want you to misunderstand.
All right, Mr. Sherry.
Since Ms. Dayton raised it, I forget, what is the story with the learner profile out of ECRIS? And we saw a draft of that like 3 years ago?
It's on our agenda for our first meeting next year.
Yeah, I wasn't on that question. I'm on the question of why isn't it already out? I mean, I guess I'm on the part of, it was presented to us and then it was gonna be sent, and here we are talking about 3 years later, so.
So yes, Dr. Gilday had shared the one that she had used in Illinois, which was from ECRA within ECRIS. It is only as good as the data that you have to put into it. So we were working through that and developing a plan. And our understanding from ECRA was that you could draw it down pretty easily and then send it out to families. That is not the case according to ECRA. So it's something that we're still looking at and developing and working with them. But again, you're not going to have all of those tiles in that dashboard format, because if you don't have that data, again, it's only as good as the data that you have to put into it. And the challenge, the barrier is that you cannot draw it down and send it to families. And ECRA has told us that that wasn't their intention when they created it. So I think it's part of our work as we continue through the strategic plan and going forward. I'm just sharing what they had shared with us.
That's not what
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly.
that's not what we were told. Yeah,
It
whatever.
wasn't what we were told either, but then in the process, that's what happened.
Is it the part that the data's missing, or is it that ECRIS cannot generate them?
ECRIS can generate it, but again, it's not intended to go to families, and you cannot, I don't know if I'm saying it quite right, but you cannot draw it down and individually send it like through a parent link to parents, which could potentially then replace other ways of informing parents of.
Or use it during a parent-teacher conference.
Yes, and we have shared that with teachers. Yes, you can pull it up. You can even pull it up and share it with the student, but again, it's only as good as the data that you're putting in, so.
But the data that comes in comes from you guys, so.
Right, but it's not a feed. You have to draw it down from Aspen or other systems and then import it into the system. I'm not the data manager for that system, so we can get more information. Again, I'm just sharing with you what ECRA has shared with us. And
I'm sitting here baffled because just maybe as an IT person, this is where I'm not an educator, but I am an IT person. That sounds complicated, but that should have been done in about 20 minutes. So I'm wondering who's on the data management part of this thing that's preventing us from doing that. How do we remove that as a competitor? But, okay.
And we want to explore
First
that.
time I'm hearing that's the reason. Okay.
That's what John Gada from ECRA has shared with us.
So I specifically talked to Tony about this as something to look at over the summer, because that had been a request that we have a meeting on this to have this as an agenda item. So that's what I was trying to say, is I think that's going to be work before we move forward. Joan, are you
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry you had me like you talked to Tony about IT, and I was like, you talking to somebody in the IT department?
No. This was something that the board was very interested in, because it came up when we were talking about things we wanted to see for next year. And so it's at our first meeting next year to really dive into this and understand where we are, what are we doing, what is our plan for moving forward.
Okay. All right, so we're going to hear more about this strategic plan, I think, next year. If you look at the next item, we're gonna get regular updates. Any other discussion on this? Kim, did you want to have to work on face? Yeah. The document program. So,
You're not gonna take long, right? No.
Okay. Actually, I just want to give credit to, this is really a team effort, it's not just me, I'm working with Ann Carvello and Irene Parisi, and they will be the champions of this grant as I exit the district. And so the idea here was to identify a couple of schools to act as field tests for a concept around sort of a structured dialogue and empowering parents as partners in learning. A very specific and purposeful approach to engaging parents in the academic, personal, and interpersonal progress of their children and getting them involved in the goals that the kids are setting and what they can do at home to support the achievement of those goals. So Lebanon School and Julian Curtis School volunteered, and not just their principals, but we also went and spoke to their teaching staff to ensure that they were on board and interested and engaged in this potential field test, and then we presented a grant application to the Alliance and were awarded the grant to fund that. The majority of the grant will fund a facilitator to come in and actually manage the detail of that program throughout the year, and it will entail workshops for parents and for staff on really maximizing the opportunities that they have for conferencing. Part of it will be field testing a second conference in the spring, so you get the the fall, here's where we are with the data, here's what the goals that are being set, here are the strategies we're going to be using in school, here's things that you can do at home, and then come back again at the end of March, and where are we and what progress have we made, and what questions do you have. There's also an idea for a book study for staff that's voluntary, and a couple of other strategies that we'll put into place, including a communication plan so that there's like an ongoing dialogue and updating with parents throughout the school year. So those are some of the components. We're excited about it, and that is actually starting now as we get back the results of the Panorama Family Engagement Survey. Starting to look specifically at those two schools, but also comparing that data with the other schools on the degree to which their families are currently engaged. And part of that data will be used as the metric for looking at how successful we've been.
Thank you. Dr. Francis.
I apparently had a temporary not being here moment. Which schools, two schools did you say?
And 11 and thanks.
Anything else on this topic of the strategic plan? Otherwise, we'll hear more coming in the fall. Okay then, moving on to our next item on the agenda. This would be our report schedule. So, Francis, I think you're taking the lead on this one.
So this is.
Thank you very much.
Actually, it was interesting that both I think the board members and the administrators at our last PGC meeting were both like, it would be really good to have a discussion about next year's plan before the vote at the end. So this is a discussion day. It will come back as an agenda item at our next meeting for an actual vote. I did send out an email in the form of the minutes initially, and then I sent one out today, which I've also copied for everybody, and I wasn't sure I was going to get color, but thank you very much. You got color for all of us. But you have it in an email as well. And I sent it to you just right before the meeting, so you can send it to the cabinet members in any case, and also we'll need to post it as well. So just as a little orientation on here, the yellow was what was sent out and posted with board docs as changes we had discussed at the last meeting. Some of those I actually just put into the schedule in the green, and some of them are new from today. So the green really is changes from what is currently in board docs that are up from our meeting today. So just sort of color coding of how that goes. My thought was to go through what we saw as sort of the major sort of themes that we thought were important or concepts in terms of how we look at the schedule, and then how we tried to implement that into the schedule, and then also to outline points where we think it would be really great to get feedback from the board in terms of potential changes. So diving right in, You know, one of the big things we've talked about a lot is sort of having a time to have sort of deeper dives about achievement, about data, about you know, some of our big issues. And so the first thing we did was sort of look at when do we get back data, when would that data be ready, and then how do we move this forward. And I did speak to Tony Jones about this as well in terms of sort of lining things up and her thoughts about some of these concepts. And I won't speak for her, but I do think she thought that most of this was good in terms of things that we could discuss. So the thought was that our September 5th meeting, we've had trouble in the past with certain things not being ready yet. So we had changed that and made, I'm sorry, that's off topic for a moment. So there's the 3 deep dive meetings would be an October one, a March one, and a June one. We had talked in PGC and with Dr. Jones about potentially having one of these being off-site Saturday for that really big dive in October. And it turned out that we had a month between 2 meetings. So my suggestion is to have a Saturday, October 5th retreat off-site for sort of that big data dive. Then October 5th.
She just meant like
The first one would be October, so on October 5th. The meeting in October would be October 5th for that first one. Then to do a March 5th one based on when the next data comes back. So in terms of what we officially voted on, that would require a flip-flop for a professional development day and a retreat date. And then June 4th was a retreat that we'd already set up to do that.
Just a quick question. So achievement data, is this achievement data for the year ending now, or are we actually hoping the state is going to get us data in a timely manner? Because we had that issue this year.
So it was our thought that the data that we get back from, so I think if you look at the notes, it's the SBA data, which would be from this April. And then STAR data, NGSS, PSAT, SAT, and AP. So the expectation when we looked at it was that all of that data should be back in time for that meeting. And then beyond that, to actually look at potentially the goals that come from that, that they're setting out, so that we would then have a point to move from there. The March 5th, is in here, there's STAR data, NGAI, and Las Links that would be expected to be back from that, and it would also be a time to follow potentially on any progress or things that we have seen from the prior goals that were set. And then the June 4th, there is STAR data that would come back from that. That would be probably a smaller update, and that's a retreat slot that we already had set up. So the suggestion is for those 3 meetings to be kind of our bigger sort of data dives in terms of that.
I'm sorry, I just heard, I didn't track all of that, but I heard the June 4th meeting about STAR.
So I think there is some spring data that we thought would be ready by the June 4th.
No.
Okay, so that.
The September was accurate, and I didn't catch you had a March date in there?
March 5th.
You'll have the feedback based on STAR, you'll have winter benchmark back by then. But that.
So you have STAR and JI and Last Links in March, yes?
We will have, we may or may not have NGAI. That state is very non-committal on that because they do not know how long it's going to take them to process NGSS. They have been very non-committal on that.
So we had based this on sort of the data we've gotten from you guys, so we can certainly go back and review that.
Right. I think I noted that the NGAI is subject to the state. They don't want to commit to anything.
Obviously, we would have to adjust, but it seemed like those were sort of some options for that.
I think March is safe-ish. I would say safe-ish. You would certainly have benchmark data, a winter benchmark. Whether we'll have NGAI, I think, is a question. But it's the June one that my ears pricked up.
Okay. I think that was felt to be probably a small component of our June meeting anyway. Right. So it wasn't sort of going to be a big data dive at that point because it was a relatively small amount of data. Right. So that was the lesser of the 3. The next thing in terms of big areas was talking about board goals. I think, as we get into a pattern for this, I don't think we'll need as many meetings. But I think we had actually put 4 initially when we were talking today. I thought we missed one, but I guess we hadn't actually necessarily intended it. So I wrote 4 to 5 times during the year, which I know is a lot, but hopefully to talk about our board goals. So the thought was September would be a time to sort of follow up and say, okay, what are our action plans, or what are we doing with the goals that we had set in the spring? January would be a progress update at that time. May, when we're doing our self-evaluation, would be a time to reflect on our progress from the prior goals, start the discussion for the 2021 goals. The plan would be to vote on them June 18th, so we have talked today about potentially wanting that June 4th retreat time, if needed, to be a time to follow up in terms of the goals that we had discussed and set on May 7th. Moving forward, as I was sort of writing up these notes, I could see that if we were better at it, we might be able to narrow it down to 3 meetings. You would set your goals and your action plan sort of together, have an update, and then do your review, your new ones, and your plan sort of maybe in a 3rd meeting. But I kind of feel like we're not necessarily that good at it yet, so we may need a little bit more time, I think, to get ourselves really staying on top of it. And so that was the suggestion there. Then so a little bit less in terms of the big ideas, but the September 5th, we had really felt like there was a couple of things that had come up in terms of requests. So there was the ECRIS, there was the assessments. I think already in there had been the curriculum management and review cycle. And so we sort of felt like this would be a good time to kind of pull together a number of things that were related to the curriculum things. So again, the assessment plan, the summer institute work, the curriculum management review cycle. I don't know why, but it seemed like the student profile and ECRIS kind of fit into that concept in terms of evaluating students and that information. So that was going to go into that meeting, and we had put in the board action plans. So that was sort of a change for our September retreat, I think, from what had originally been maybe put in there. Should I just keep moving through? All right, master facility plan. I think we had really talked about the importance of that, the importance of keeping that in the forefront of our thoughts. We're struggling a little bit with sort of how do we do that. I think there's some discussion we've had about committee work and other kinds of things, but the other thought we had was our first budget meeting typically is a very quick meeting where the budget is just sort of presented, and we thought we probably could add some other things to that would probably be a really good time to review our master facility plan, and I think that might be an appropriate time, Lori's not here anymore, but to do a review of the Blum Shapiro work and sort of what the recommendations, and I sort of feel like that ties in very much to our capital plan work. So that seemed like sort of a logical time to group those things together and to bring those things a bit more to the forefront in terms of keeping them in our discussions. So we wanted to move that in there. The other big sort of piece is, we talk about the strategic plan obviously in terms of looking at what are the results and what are the things that we are getting from our current plan, but also we need to start looking at the concept of reviewing, evaluating, to me also learning how to build a better strategic plan, and then moving forward to whatever we want it to be, whether it's a renewal, a slight thing, or whatever our next phase is going to be, we need time to talk about it. So I'm not predetermining what it's going to be, but just suggesting that we need to schedule some time for that. So one thought was that our December 11th professional development could be potentially a combination of learning, I might just put this in there, but what makes a good strategic plan? What are the elements that you want in there? And potentially, as we learn that, also sort of review our current one and understand, what were good elements, what were things that maybe we could have done differently, and to start thinking about that in terms of the overall potential next step. Then the March 5th retreat, which we were looking at, one component would be the data information, but also to start talking about renewal development, what are our thoughts about our strategic plan going forward. And then that June 4th retreat would be, I think, a more, finalizing plan, at least, and I sort of just put in here, at least for the next year, kind of what we were doing, and if we felt like our thoughts were a larger 5 or 3 year or whatever it may be, that would be another time to have that discussion. Keep rolling? Okay. Professional development, so I talked a little bit about that in terms of potentially the strategic plan on that December 11th meeting, which, oh, by the way, you pointed out that when we translated it, I think we originally had Wednesday, December 11th, and now it ended up as Thursday, December 11th. So I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to be, but we should just fix the document on our most recent one. So we voted on Wednesday, December 11th, but in our configuration,
It's probably Wednesday.
I think that got knocked up. But anyway, so professional development. So that was one. just, again, these are just ideas that to put out there. We had talked about communication as being one of our big board goals. We didn't get to that in our last round of professional development, so that may be one that we would want to do, so we could potentially use, for example, our January for that. And then, I don't know that we need to decide too far ahead, but just putting some possibilities for the next round. So do we want to do something on governance? Do we want to do something on agenda planning and meeting efficiency? When I talked to Tony, she was actually saying sometimes she recommends, like, if there's an area that maybe we don't know as much about within SEL. So if, mindfulness is a big piece of our SEL, is that something that would be worth us learning more about? So, I think it might make sense for us to wait a little bit before we decide what that last one's going to be, but those are potentially some thoughts in terms of that professional development. And then just to point out again that we would recommend that we flip-flop the dates just in terms of working with that, the achievement data and those things. Oh no, bugs are coming in. Oh no, it's like this. That's right, reports. The other big thing, and I don't know if anybody kind of went through and looked at some of these things, but trying to figure out, one, do we need all of the reports we have in here? And I know it's very hard to get rid of reports, but I encourage people, before the next meeting to think about that again. We had one brave suggestion today in our meeting, which was the magnet report, which is actually not for this year, but for the year after, with the thought that many of those issues are covered in other reports. So whether it's specifically how does it work within one school, or, what do you like to think about that? But racial balance, is it part of that issue in terms of the magnet, migration of students or whatever it may be? Does it really necessarily need to be its own report? So that's, one way to try and cut back a little bit. On the other hand, we had no trouble coming up with new ideas of things to do. So one thing was, there's been the revolving conversation, I think, about middle school. We did have the discussion about the high school and potentially sort of reimagining. So we wanted to add in a report that we thought about as a secondary school. So I think that's something we've already talked about, but we sort of thought, we keep hearing little tidbits about how the school day in elementary school maybe is changing in terms of how it's being organized. Other things are happening at the elementary school level, and we never really get more of a broad sort of update on how are things happening in elementary school. Is there a change in culture of how we're doing things, and that it might make sense for us to have that as well, maybe separate from the specific academic data, but just to have a sense of, what are we doing that's differently now than maybe 10 years ago. And that we just, haven't really heard that. So we were suggesting that we might do, I think it was April meeting, which one did I say? I have it written down.
We
Sorry.
had
Elementary was in March, and then the secondary was, I believe, in April. Oh no, here we go. Yeah, I put it out of order. So I put actually the secondary in first on the list, but anyway, April 23rd, and then the elementary would be the March. So we kind of do one, and then the next meeting we would do the next. I understand that. In terms of the other piece that I put in here was that when I looked at our cycle, so we have some things we see every year, but we have some that we see every 2 years and other ones every 3 years, starting to try and look forward a little bit. It turned out we only had one report out of the 11 in next year's schedule, and then we had 5 the year after and 5 the year after that, and that seemed relatively uneven. So we were talking about potentially moving one of those forward. So I thought human resources might be a good one for that, because that's an every 3-year report that would then come at the 2-year mark, with potentially a question of how we want to tie that in terms of leadership development as one of our strategic plan points. So doing that sort of a combination of those two next year might be a good piece for doing that. One of the other pieces that came up was sort of a whole student development. And I have to be honest, I don't remember all the pieces that go into that, but we were talking about maybe would it make sense to split that, because again, that's one of the reports that would be the year after. Would we potentially do an SEL report? That's a big piece of that, either as one of our strategic plan updates or as a separate report. I think we were leaning towards doing that as one of the strategic plan updates, because I'm sorry I didn't mention this, but if you guys have looked at it, there's lots of strategic plan updates to be determined. And so one of the questions is sort of where, how do we want to do that? And I think that's in the next section. So that was one of the possibilities we were thinking about, potentially moving something up. Another thing was in terms of technology. Actually, after the meeting today, so I have to confess to my PGC people, as I was writing up the notes, The meeting, if we do our September 5th meeting and October 5th meetings, the way we were talking about it, it didn't leave that meeting in October actually that heavily done. So we could potentially still keep the portion of technology that's really the student portion, or the portion that's more related to those aspects there. But we were saying that we may want to do an executive session follow-up in terms of the security components of that. So, I'm not exactly sure what was expected to be in that report, but to potentially split that and to have another follow-up in terms of the executive session for that. Oh, and then one other minor point in terms of reports was the Alliance grants, just to have a written report so that in May, once those have been settled, that we get that in a timely fashion. I don't know if we would want to move up the whole Alliance report that they do till then, and we could certainly ask Julie about that, or whether we would just have them give us just a list of the grants, but I think we would like to see that in that May timeframe when that's been decided, so that we sort of know it soon afterwards, and just have that as an automatic report that gets posted, as opposed to sort of an email or something else. The career tech ed, just a small point that we were saying, it would be good in that to include the right tech, other school options that students have, sort of broaden that and make sure we're including some of those other things as well. And then, all right, I'm almost done. Last one, the strategic plan updates. I mentioned a couple already. I think that's something that we sort of two different levels of discussion for this is one sort of specific things we want in there, but I think also, how do we want to make those decisions? When do we want to decide it? And both for this, and I think just the reports in general, how do we feel like it's best to get board input to make sure that when we're getting these reports, we feel like it's hitting what we were expecting to hear. But in terms of some of the specifics, some of the things we talked about in terms of possible topics would be the SEL, personalized learning, sort of math, personal pace. So is that sort of an update in terms of looking at some of those pieces more specifically? Leadership, which is part of the strategic plan. And we also said, or if it's appropriate to have that be part of the HR report. FACE, and certainly if we've got a pilot that's going on, that sounds like it would be a great update for that. Summer Institute curriculum goals, maybe that would be something at the end of the year that we'd see what's coming up for the summer and then get the update in the fall as part of that initial September meeting. That was a lot of talking. So we have, so those, everybody got that information emailed to you, posted as well. This, and then, obviously open for questions now, and then, I assume it's allowed if people just want to send me comments, not as a discussion, and then obviously I could try and incorporate things or bring it back for the next time before the vote.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Gaetan, thanks for doing this. This is a miserable task. So whoever else worked with you on it, thank you.
Team effort.
Thank you too.
Kim and Rob too. Yeah.
You want feedback?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you or don't
Can
you?
I add one more quick thing I just forgot?
Sure.
It's exactly what you're talking about. Do we want to also add, I'm sorry, because I wrote it on my paper, but I didn't have it typed yet, because it came up today, the inventory snapshots for that September meeting, and then the inventory review and provide priority review set up for the possible October 5th. Sorry. Yeah.
You're a perfect segue, because I was going to give you 4 bits of feedback.
Yes.
And I looked at this a little bit differently. So I didn't start with the calendar, and I realized the gravitational pull of start with the calendar, right? I kind of went the other way. I go to what is it we need to go over and then figure out later when it's done.
We could do that, just so you know. That's how we approach this.
Right, so what my feedback would be, I wrote it down in 4 things. I wrote down committees. I'll go through each one of these. Committees, focus, retreat time, and subject learning time. Okay. What I heard out of our last discussion, and I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day, is we say we want to get more focused, we say we want to pick things, and then we go and we wind up with agenda plans that look like this, right? And our problem is self-discipline. Or Our other problem is we gotta find another way to run the railroad. We have to modify our practice, to use Irene's term. What I would say is in terms of the content, okay, I still think there's too much. But, and now I heard today, you were saying, okay, and by the way, there was this gravitational pull to add stuff. I think we have to have more discipline as a board to figure out what we're gonna take off this list. And, okay, the one thing though that bothers me in the balance here on the list is, I reluctantly went along with Adriana when she was doing this. Her suggestion to collapse academic subjects together, I don't think that worked, okay? And the reason I don't think it works, and it bothers me that I go down this list, and the most important thing in our strategic dashboard from an academic perspective is how we doing in English, how we doing in math, how we doing in science. And we've squished that stuff into essentially an agenda item on, we've got that now, all of that in 2 agenda items on either in one meeting or separate meetings. That sounds completely out of balance to me on what we need to do as a board and where we should be spending our time. I would think we would need to spend more time on each one of those. And I don't know if it means you leave it as STEM, but you dedicate a lot more time, or you break it back out. So we're talking about, the science and technology separately from the mathematics.
The one counter I would say to that is and we'll have to really craft this carefully, but I think that the 3 retreats
Right.
are also going to be times when we're talking about this. And we're going to be talking about the goal setting that's happening and those things. So
I heard you say that, and
Yeah.
I was going to push back on that too, because the problem with it is we're not great as a board of, let's have 20% of the conversation in this meeting, pick the next 30% up. That idea that we can have this conversation in a coordinated way and it's threading across meetings, I would discourage that because I don't think we're real good at that. I'd love to be in that place aspirationally, but in the bucket of cold water. So the thing I would love to see I would love to see us doubling down more on the major on the majors, don't major on the minors.
So what would you like to take out?
Well, I was going to say there's 2 ways to deal with this. One way to deal with this is
Just going to efficiency.
I'm going to go to efficiency. I think some of this stuff we should push into notifications of the board. It's not on the agenda unless somebody drags it onto the agenda. There's some stuff in here, candidly, that we put on our agenda and we want to talk about it, and I'm the worst. But everybody else all ate it from a bad too. We put an agenda on it, it's like Pavlov's dog, we've got to talk about it.
Making written reports.
Written reports or other things. There's a second one I have. There's a second one, which is my second suggestion, is candidly, I think there are different board members that have different hunger for different depth to learn on a topic. I think we should try to take some of these things, get them off of the board agenda, ask Tony in that subject area for someone to create a training on that item, formally notice it, right? Like as an example, you just raised one, I forget which one you just raised. You want to know more about in the elementary classroom or you want to know more about SEL and what have you. You feel like you need to learn about that so you can be an intelligent board member about it. That's great. Occasionally, I don't need a 45-minute dog and pony on that, me personally. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to serve your need, but also make the board agendas more efficient by saying, okay, like I think one meeting, Irene, you did some training sessions on Aspen and curriculum, right? And it wasn't it didn't clog up the board agenda. And if you could come to it and you were interested in it, it was really useful. If you as a board member weren't, it wasn't one of those mandatory things. So that may be a way to clear out.
Great plug for everyone to look through this list and say, okay, what is it that I can live with as a written or as a separate from the board meeting opportunity? Because I think it'll be great, but obviously the 3 of us can't make that decision for everybody. So if everybody writes down their 5 things they think.
I'll do it.
Email them to me,
Right.
and then I can tally it up and come back in next time and say, this is what I heard, let's vote on moving that.
And the last one I was gonna say is, I would hope we would get a lot better at leveraging committees, okay, as an example. There's a lot of stuff here that's like being dragged onto the board's agenda that candidly could be on here as a shorter item, almost a report from the administrator and the board committee on what they did, like this data conversation. I'm cringing on the full board having a conversation about data and ECRIS and connections and scorecards and what, it's like somebody needs to like pre-do that, and it should have been, I would have thought it would have been in the budget committee, because the budget committee is responsible for budget, finance, and facilities and all of that kind of stuff. Or it could have logically been in this strategic plan. It should be assigned somewhere, or an update on the master plan, right? Before that shows up here, I would hope it would flow through a committee, and a committee would do the work of working with the administration to get it very prepared for the board, so that it's a much more efficient conversation, and it doesn't wind up burning up as much time and clogging up the agenda. So
we did talk a little bit about board efficiency and committees.
yes,
One of the conclusions, though, that we came to is that actually shouldn't really be a PGC job. We've got a lot of other stuff going on, and so the question is, as a board, how do we feel like we want to get more committee involvement, figure out what those roles should be, come to a consensus as to what these various
the roles
things
are in our policies, aren't they?
Well, I think the budget committee ended up being quite limited, and I think we've sort of thought about ways that we might want to expand it, but I don't know if that's ever been done officially. And so
I'm just suggesting ways you can leave the items in the agenda, but make the timing more efficient.
So again,
so that we don't have to take stuff off,
but
but it's more prepared and slick. The last one is, we've now slid to 5 retreats. We seem to be sliding off of 7 o'clock. Now we've slid into 6:30 for most of our meetings, and we're sliding our retreats that were 1 or 2. Now there's 5 of them. No, I counted, well, there are 5. It looks like there's 5.
Well, there's professional development, are you counting those?
I think you said 1 in here, you've got no, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's like our board's effectively slid into starting at 6 or 6:30 instead of 7 o'clock. And I know, I'm just saying in terms of scheduling, can we, for those of us who are like, it's harder.
I prefer 7.
Okay, well, anything you wanted feedback, that's all my feedback, all in one shot.
So does everybody want to comment on that too, either in your email or we'll talk about it next time?
Well, next time we're voting on this, right? So it seems like now's the time to talk about it.
Ms. Dayton.
You talked about one of the meeting dates covering the topic of what makes a good strategic plan. I think that requires an outside expert. I have a background in strategic planning. We may have new board members who don't have one, but I think they would be at a disadvantage unless we had expert advice to facilitate that.
Yeah, I was thinking of that as one of the professional development ones, so I would sort of figure, and one of the things we had talked about is whether we felt like we needed a facilitated review of our current one as well, so potentially combining those two things.
I thought we already decided that.
Well, we as a committee felt that that was a good idea, we as a board have not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we, okay, yeah, fair enough.
So you know,
If that's a consensus, I'm happy to kind of think of that as a consensus.
No, you gotta discuss it.
You can either discuss it tonight, send an email to Dr. Francis, or we'll discuss it at the next meeting. So, multiple chances.
You like the idea as a general concept to do it, yeah.
So I know we don't want to add anything, but we've had a lot of discussion over the past, 3 years over the dashboard. Now that we have the numbers, maybe append the dashboard to every board meeting as a written document.
It doesn't change that frequently.
No, but, so I think the concept the administration had come up with was that every business meeting, there's some update on the strategic plan, and that there's going to be a touch point, each point, and certainly that can be it. And then there may be some narrowing of the discussion of some portion of it, that it would be a touch point every time of, this is where we're heading, this is what we got.
Right, I know we've had a discussion about where do we find it, so I like the idea of just appending it to each business meeting, whether it's in the strategic plan update or just as a written document, and identifying if there are any changes from the previous one. Ms. Raven?
And I think there probably won't be if we focus on like the big tiles, like I know we've talked at length about what are the indicators below the big indicator, and that maybe, Gaetan, is where your comment on, how do you know if the personalized learning in gym is moving the needle? There's got to be some indicators below. You don't wait, till a year later to figure out if you met the goal. So that, to me, would be valuable in that strategic plan update, not necessarily looking at the same tile that doesn't change much.
For what it's worth.
All right, other comments on our planning document? All right, so, yeah, in terms of the report schedule, so the idea is if you have individual comments, please send them directly to Dr. Francis. I don't know if you have a PGC meeting before the 13th, so she will do her best to incorporate the comments. This item will come as an action item at our meeting on the 13th. Ms. Eves.
I just wanted to point out that we have 1 week before the next meeting. So, normally documents would go out tomorrow. And obviously you're going to need time to receive the feedback and get it, so you might want to think about, and you're going to want somebody to review it before you take action on it, so think about that timing.
Can we have
We
a-
need it by tomorrow?
By the end of the weekend, tomorrow? I mean, the sooner the better, obviously.
And give a deadline, maybe Saturday night?
Saturday night.
Saturday night. So don't go out.
Saturday is a right.
Don't go out.
We can post it till Monday, but she needs a little time with it. Kim, I did have one thought though. I think we're looking at changing the time, not only some times, because we're looking at moving back to 7 from 6, and the other is that there's a possibility of adding a retreat. So we may have to update our board meeting schedule, which we already voted on.
Yes, you will have to do that. And they all become special meetings?
No, because it's still.
Let's double check what the criteria is, but I think times I might not require it, but dates or locations might require it.
So we're only talking about adding one date?
Adding, that would be a special meeting, that one in and of itself, that's fine. But if you're changing all your times, I'm not sure if that flips it into.
I just called it FOI commission. As long as you're this far in advance, I don't think you have an issue, but yeah. If you
I
want to
recall it
double
being,
check.
if it's more than 30 days in advance, that you don't require a whole special meeting.
It's gonna get posted now, and it's gonna be 11 months in advance for the ones in the spring.
Why does it matter?
Just another question for those that come later. One of the 6:30 time slot was because of recognitions.
Yes, right.
So do you want to keep that and hold recognitions there, or do you want to incorporate it back into the 7 o'clock meeting time?
I think it's worked. Obviously, for the next meeting on Thursday, we've had to move it up even earlier because we've got just so many recognitions.
Is that 6 or 6:30?
6.
It
Why did it
says
say 6:30 on the notice?
Because
No, that's
the cancellation was,
Canceled at 6 with
It's 6 o'clock. Just for 6.
What happens is a lot of these teams are making it not only to state, but onto nationals or global conferences or competitions, and so we're waiting until they see how they play out there.
Got it.
And, all right, anything else on the report schedule? Otherwise, do your homework, please. And that brings us on to agenda planning. So, Ms. O'Neill.
I'd like to make an addition to next week's meeting of a discussion and possible vote on the bleacher plan. There are 2 plans, and the board has yet to really have a discussion on them. And I think we should leave the opportunity there to have a vote if possible. And if we don't want to vote at something that's not been discussed at a public meeting, then we need to think about when the time would be to have a vote. So I just want to add that to the agenda.
Mr. Sherr.
I understand, and maybe I'm wrong, somebody can straighten me out on this. I understand, by the way, I support that, I support you in that. So, okay, did you make a motion?
Yeah, so that's.
I'll second it.
Okay.
So discussion.
I'll second it. But my question though is, did we agree, did anybody agree with the GAF that we would review their plan? I mean, I don't know if it happened in committee or in meetings with the administrators, or what. Did anybody agree to do that?
We had to get the GAF's plan as part of our conditions for the stage.
Right. Well, not for the state, for the BET.
For the bleachers.
Right. No, but I mean, they made very clear, and I think all of us are learning this, and I am. They reached out to me and they said, look, I think they told lots of other people, because it all came back as saying, hey, we want to support the project, right? Which they've always wanted to support by giving us money. But for months now, they've been talking about, they think we need to have a little bit different design of our bleachers. And my understanding is, when they brought it to me, I said, have you steered this to the administration and to our board chair? And they seem to be going every place else but now they assured me that actually they've been doing it for a while and this is known. So my question is, did we commit to them? Because I understand they were asking for a hearing of this at the full board. I'm hearing Ms. O'Neill propose it, but I'm wondering if there's an expectation set from anybody already that we would review this at our next meeting or at an upcoming meeting.
Peter, they had 2 opportunities to present their plan at the Cardinal Field Committee meetings.
Yes, did they do that?
Yes, they did.
Okay, now, so is the committee now wanting the board to have this discussion?
The committee feels that we have a plan and we should stick to our plan.
Okay, this does need a discussion at the board level. Yes.
Yeah, so we'll discuss it next meeting.
Well, that's a session, we haven't voted yet, but. So before you vote, I missed the last stadium committee meeting, but I know they presented, and I'm waiting on the minutes and materials, and all posted if Lori hasn't done it already. I didn't have a chance to check today. They'll be posted tomorrow, so we can all go read the minutes and the documents that get posted, because I think the architect, KG&D actually worked up some additional designs. GAF presented some designs. I don't know if all the budget numbers, were all the budget numbers presented?
Yeah, the money was there for it. It wasn't the first time presented. They presented us with dollar figures this time. But KG&D also presented what the VET wanted from us as well, which was they presented us a bleacher system with everything underneath it, like team rooms.
Yeah.
So it'd be KG&D.
Our architect.
So
You were talking about 2 different plans, I wasn't sure who the date.
So we met the conditions for the release of the first $1.8 million.
Can I just ask one question? I'm really confused. How are we, where's the money for KG&D to be doing design now? How's that being paid for? I thought we didn't have any money till
We
July
actually
1.
still have some money left in the original phasing for the entire project, so to get us to where we're ready on July 1 to develop the bleacher plan.
Is that money coming out of A&E, or is that coming out of a discrete allocation?
It was a discrete allocation for Cardinal Stadium, so that we got from the RTM and the BET a cycle ago.
And that's what's paying their bill to keep having them do these designs?
Yes, because the idea is to be ready July 1 to figure out how to get out to bid quickly for bleachers and the rest to get it on the timeline that's needed.
See, I guess the other concern I would just have is, I don't know how all this is being reconciled, because the problem you're gonna have is KG&D is gonna come to this conversation because they will be in love with their plan. And then there'd be an alternate from somebody else. I don't really know how all that gets reconciled.
Peter, they wouldn't necessarily,
Yeah, of course.
we have to go to bid on the plan. They're not necessarily gonna be the architect.
Exactly.
They're just the overall structure. We have to go to bid.
No, you're talking about you have to put a bid for the architect?
To design the bleachers and to go out and build them as well, yeah.
Is that bid out already?
No.
You can put the bid out now, but it has to be contingent upon the funding, which is
Right.
July 1. But
So
that,
you can't really start July 1, given where we are right now.
well, you would start the RFP process. But let's take a step back for a minute, just so everybody is on the same page. We have a appropriation from the RTM with conditions from the BET for the bleachers, for the press box, for some paving, and for additional design money for future work. That is what the RTM just approved. The conditions were that we explore the space under the bleachers and raising private money, and then the second part, the other condition, is land use agency approvals. So part of the money is the first part, looking at what's possible under the bleachers and seeing if we can raise donations. It doesn't have to be GAF, by the way, it is not specific to them. There are other organizations in town that may decide that they want to go raise money for the bleachers. So, but we are moving forward with the bleacher plan, that's the idea. What is happening now, what GAF proposes, is if you're going to build something under the bleachers, as we develop the design for the bleachers, it may change the configuration. Because the original configuration of the bleachers has ramps on the sides, handicapped accessible, plus entryways in the middle of the bleachers to allow for better ingress and egress. If you're going to put things underneath, you have to build around those. You also would put in electrical and plumbing underneath. You probably put a concrete pad. So it would change the way you develop the bleacher plan, knowing what you would put under. That's the only reason why the discussion is happening now. Because you don't want to put bleachers in and then decide your next phase is to put something underneath and, oh God, we've got to remove the bleachers we just put in. So that's where we are, I think.
So it's an agenda item for next meeting.
Well, so here's the question about that, though. Barbara's motion is to make it, I believe, an action item. I don't know that we're ready for action in the first instance. The other is, I really don't like the idea of putting this on the agenda as an action item when it hasn't been discussed at a public meeting already, which is bad practice.
So
Well,
that's why I said then if we're not comfortable doing that, then we need to then that night prepare then to have another meeting if we feel we needed to make the decision. But I want it on the agenda and I want it as an action item because to sit and just discuss it, we cannot act, that's fine. But to not have it as an action, to not have an action item means then we have to change the agenda and all that night. And there are two plans. One of them is and I think the board should be fully aware of what both those plans comprise and what the impact might be going forward on other parts of the stadium plan.
Well, Barbara, you actually raise a good point. There's actually 3 plans. There's the original plan we voted on to move forward with. The bleacher money is phase 1, right? The additional phase 2 and 3 is basically what's on the table. So I think what you have to actually compare is what we originally were looking at in terms of the buildings and the road, moving the tennis courts, and then what would you do if you put the things under the bleachers, and you have to have the discussion, what would that mean for the road, because it's a big aspect of the plan. Ms. Stone.
I recall that we did vote on option B 1,000 years ago, and now the committee seems to be doing a lot of work, and they've come up with a plan, but it seems like the BET put some nice conditions on it, so that you're going to have to flesh it out to meet some conditions such as making sure we maximize the space under it. I don't think it's my role to opine on all the committee work that's been put into this. I don't plan to re-engineer it, and I'm fine with just you providing me information at this time. I think it sounds like we already have a plan to move forward. So I don't see it as a need to add it to the agenda.
Well, so I actually don't have any problem having a discussion at the public meeting because I think that's the right place for it. I haven't seen all the docs that were presented at the committee, and I think it's a good opportunity for Ralph and possibly KG&D, if they're available, to walk through all the things that are on the table, all 3 options basically. I do take issue with the vote. I would note we're likely adding, and this would be the next thing on agenda planning, a retreat with Dr. Jones the week of July 8th. We could easily add an hour onto that meeting and take a vote there if needed. So. Mistake.
I don't want to clog up our retreat with Tony Jones, our very first one, with food services and Cardinal Stadium plan. I don't think that's appropriate. I think we need to be at a much higher level, a very strategic level, And I would like to now call the question on adding it to the agenda as a discussion item.
Actually, it says
Well,
an
wait,
action item.
I think Barbara's got it right. That's the point I was gonna make is, for sheer logistic purposes, right? We need to be prepared to express, if the board is ready to express an opinion on these things. We may wind up in a place, Barbara, and I think you can see this point, we might wind up in a place where what we're already doing right now is what we stick with, right? But if we can prepare our agenda so that we're in a position to signal this, Ralph, you've said 100 times, I gotta get started on July 1. This idea that if we're gonna get information and potentially give direction through a vote, but we've put ourselves in a box where, because of the agenda, we have no way of expressing that opinion, that to me sounds like a really bad idea. We may wind up, I don't know, because I haven't seen this stuff, I haven't heard it. I have no idea if this is, from my perspective, if we're changing anything. The other point is, Kathleen, candidly, this is a board, the board needs to be owning this because the BET and others are gonna look to us and say, did you?
Own it. Is it Havemeyer, we own it? Am I misunderstanding? We voted on something a while ago, yes? Option B.
Well,
Right,
let's talk about this stuff appeared on our agendas as this committee was trying to keep up with the BET. The stuff appeared on like 2 days' notice. I mean, come on, let's not talk about we've been all organized in dealing with it. You guys came before the BET, you went and got feedback from the BET, and then you had to rush from the board and we had to take up an item right away and pass it right away to keep up with their schedule. This is happening, okay?
And we have new information.
What I'm trying to do is be sure we're in a position to make decisions if we're gonna change any decisions so that we don't screw up the schedule that Ralph is on. And I think we should do it the way Barbara's suggesting. If we don't need the vote, then there's gonna be no motion made and there's no vote to take. To put ourselves in a box would be a bad idea.
I'd like to add it as a discussion item, and at that time, we can decide in agenda planning if we want to add an additional meeting in June to take action or not.
When the public won't be there to speak, after everyone's gone for vacation?
Nobody leaves for vacation the minute school is out. We have a few days.
So the motion on the table is to add it as an action item. If that motion fails, it was already the note Ralph said that we would take it up as a discussion item at the meeting. I would add it to the agenda as a discussion item. And if somebody feels they want, yep, we'll take, yes.
You can't.
No, vote on the
Right.
motion.
Right,
to
we can-
add it as an
Yes,
action.
okay, so the motion on the table is to add the Cardinal Stadium item to the action item, as an action item to our agenda for the meeting next Thursday. All those in favor? All those opposed? 2, 4, all those abstaining. 3, 4, 1, so the motion fails.
I have another motion.
Ms. Dayton,
I'd like to add it to the next meeting agenda as a discussion item.
so I'll second that. Any discussion?
I just want to be clear. By doing this, if we want to take any kind of vote on this subject at the next meeting, we will not be allowed to do that.
Actually, no. We can amend our agenda at the meeting. We'd have to do it at the
You have to do it at the beginning.
front end.
You
Need a
cannot, so once we get to the discussion,
It's a special
because
meeting, you can't change the agenda.
No, our business meeting is not
no, this is going to become a special meeting,
It's
so
a
you
special
can't
meeting
change the
today.
agenda. Okay, so I just want to be clear, because I just want to be clear. What we're saying is, we're now putting ourselves in a position where even if we want to signal anything, SOMER, anything, we will not be allowed to do that. Is that right?
You can take a SOMER at any time, Peter.
No, you can't, not in a special meeting.
Yes, you can. It's a sense of the meeting. It is not a motion for action.
It's not an action,
It's just a motion of how the board feels. It's Robert's rules.
Yeah, that's not action. Okay, fine.
All right, so we're voting
Discussion.
The reason that I want it as a discussion item is to give the public a chance to hear everything that we are going to hear before we take action. That's why I want it as a discussion item in our next meeting. Because I don't want to lock out the public by having us take action without them telling us what their feedback is. That's why I think a discussion item
Isn't
is
it gonna
good.
be a meeting with public feedback anyway, and it's gonna be an item on our agenda?
The public feedback, though, Peter, comes at the front of the meeting before we've had an opportunity to have a discussion. That's why you don't vote on items at the same meeting, that you bring them up for the first instance.
Okay, like we've never done that before, but, okay.
All right. Dr. Francis, were you calling the question?
Oh, I would like to vote.
Oh, you're calling the question. All right. I seconded the motion. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of adding the stadium as an agenda item to our business meeting? Discussion item, right. All right, so 8-0, we will add it as a discussion item at our next meeting. All right, there's one last thing for agenda planning because it got added and it saves me from having to do an email. Everybody indicated they're available to do a retreat with Dr. Jones the week of July 8th. July 9th, there's a negotiation session, so that's off the table. So it's either Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday of that week, unless y'all want to spend a Friday night together. So, okay, so the week, it's July 8th, July 10th, or July 11th.
Why isn't it on Saturday?
We were trying to do this during the week because there were people that had things on the weekends throughout the month of July. So that's what we're looking at. So I'm looking for your input. 8th, 10th, or 11th. Everybody check their calendars. So that's the other question. Do we want to do it at 6 or 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock is fine. I have no problem with that. Did everybody check your... No, it's fine for me. Well, and I think we're 7. Ms. Dave, do you have a
I
preference?
prefer earlier in the week if it's possible.
Okay, so that would mean Monday or Wednesday. Anybody have an objection to the 8th or the 10th? Anybody have a preference?
I prefer the 10th, but I can do the 8th.
You prefer the...
No, either.
I say we do it on the 8th just because the sooner we get this scheduled, I think the better. So we're going to go with Monday, the 8th at 7 p.m. And that'll be here at Havemeyer. Yeah, that'll be here. In a room with air conditioning, maybe development, staff development is cooler.
It's cold in there.
Just gotta let this run for a while.
What?
Let this run for a while.
No, it's a public meeting, but we're going to have it right here. That's what public meetings are about.
Okay, so
Staff development was really
What was your?
She wants to rethink the place we have it. That's it.
Well, that's where we've traditionally done retreats and with the superintendent. Whatever. I don't understand that snarky comment. But,
All right.
What did I miss?
All right, anything else for agenda planning? God, I hope not. Dr. Francis, you have a motion you'd like to make?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second that. All those in favor of adjourning? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Just so everyone knows, I'm gonna have to cancel the meeting that I posted today and repost it, so with the agenda plan change, so just don't get freaked out.
I'll be home 6:30.
I never